Hey everyone, welcome back. I've got another set of stories for you today, and we're starting with something that's going to make your jaw drop. Today's first story is about a sister's graduation party that turned into the most shocking paternity reveal you can imagine. Before we dive in, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who's been active in the comments and supporting the channel lately. Seriously, it means a lot. I'm really happy to see all the engagement and love you've been showing. You guys keep this channel growing. So now, picture this: a beautiful graduation party, proud parents, extended family everywhere, and then one drunk uncle stands up to give a speech. What he says next doesn't just stop the party, it ends an entire marriage and destroys a family in one sentence. My sister just graduated from college with honors. Like, full academic scholarship, dean's list every semester, the whole thing. My parents were beyond proud. They decided to throw her this massive graduation party at our house. And I mean massive. They rented tables, hired caterers, set up a photo backdrop, the works. The guest list was insane. Extended family from 3 states, her college friends, high school teachers, childhood neighbors, even her old soccer coach. 75 people. Easy. My mum spent weeks planning every detail. My dad kept joking that this party cost more than his own wedding. The day arrived and everything was perfect. The weather cooperated, the food was amazing, and my sister looked so happy. She kept tearing up every time someone congratulated her. My parents gave this beautiful joint speech about how proud they were, how she'd always been driven and focused, how they couldn't wait to see what she'd accomplish next. There wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. People were taking photos, the champagne was flowing, and honestly, it felt like one of those movie moments where everything just comes together perfectly. Then came the speeches from family and friends. A few of her professors sent video messages. Her best friend made everyone laugh with embarrassing college stories. My grandma got emotional talking about being the first in our family to graduate college. It was all very sweet and wholesome. And then my uncle stood up, my mom's brother. He'd been drinking pretty heavily all afternoon, which wasn't unusual for him, but nobody thought much of it. He's always been the loud, overly affectionate type at family gatherings. He grabbed his glass, tapped it with a fork to get everyone's attention, and started rambling about how proud he was. Standard uncle speech stuff. How he remembered when my sister was born, how he'd watched her grow up, how she'd always been special. Everyone was smiling, nodding along. Then he said it. Just blurted it out like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm so proud of my daughter." Dead silence, like someone had hit mute on the entire party. 75 people just froze. I thought I'd misheard him. Maybe he misspoke. Maybe he meant niece and the alcohol messed up his words. But the look on my mom's face told me everything. She went pale. Actually pale. My dad was standing next to her, and I watched his expression change in real time. Confusion, then realization, then something I'd never seen on his face before. Just complete devastation. My aunt, my uncle's wife, stood up so fast her chair fell over. She screamed at him, asked him what he just said. My uncle suddenly looked very sober, very aware that he'd just detonated a bomb in the middle of my sister's party. He started stammering, trying to backtrack, but it was too late. My aunt turned to my mum and started yelling, asking if it was true, asking how long. My mum was crying, trying to get her to calm down, to not do this here, not now. But that wasn't even the worst part. My dad just stood there, completely silent, staring at my sister. And my sister, God, my sister looked between my mum and my uncle and my dad, and you could see the exact moment she understood. Her whole face just crumbled. She asked my mum if it was true, point blank. In front of everyone. My mum couldn't even answer. She just kept crying and saying she was sorry. My aunt grabbed a champagne glass off the table and threw it. It shattered against the photo backdrop. That's when the party truly descended into chaos. People started yelling. Some guests were trying to leave. Others were frozen, watching this family meltdown like it was a reality show. My sister's friends were trying to comfort her, but she shoved past them and locked herself in the upstairs bathroom. I could hear her sobbing from the backyard. My dad didn't yell, didn't throw anything, didn't even raise his voice. He just looked at my mom one more time, turned around and walked out, got in his car and drove away. He didn't come back that night. My uncle tried to follow him, tried to apologize, but my dad wouldn't even acknowledge him. My aunt was screaming at my mum, calling her every name you can imagine. Other family members were trying to intervene, trying to get people to calm down, but there was no calming this down. This was 23 years of lies exploding in front of everyone who mattered. The caterers didn't know what to do. Some guests grabbed their stuff and left without saying goodbye. Others stood around in uncomfortable clusters, whispering. My mum's best friend tried to console her, but my mum was inconsolable. She kept saying she never meant for it to happen like this, that nobody was ever supposed to know. My uncle left with my aunt still screaming at him. I heard later she filed for separation that same week. I spent an hour outside the bathroom door trying to get my sister to come out. She wouldn't. She just kept asking me if I knew. If everyone knew. If her entire life was a lie. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know. Nobody knew except my mom and my uncle, apparently. And now everyone knew. All 75 witnesses to what should have been one of the best days of her life. The next morning, my dad came back to the house when my mom was out. He packed a bag, didn't say much to me, just that he needed time to think, that he couldn't be here right now. I asked him if he still loved my sister, if this changed anything between them. He said he didn't know, that he needed to process the fact that his entire marriage was built on a lie. Then he left again. Later that day, I found out he'd contacted a divorce attorney. By the end of the week, my mum had been served papers. My sister won't speak to my mum, won't even be in the same room as her. She moved in with her boyfriend and refuses to come to the house. She blocked my uncle on everything, changed her number so he couldn't call her. My mum keeps trying to reach out, leaving these long voicemails about how sorry she is, how it was a mistake, how she loves her. My sister deletes them without listening. The family group chat that used to be full of memes and dinner plans is just dead now. Nobody knows what to say. Thanksgiving is coming up and there's no plan, no host, no idea who would even show up. My dad's side of the family has completely cut off my mum. My mum's side is split between people who think my uncle is a monster and people who think this should have stayed buried. I'm stuck in the middle, trying to maintain relationships with everyone while watching my entire family structure collapse. And the worst part is, I don't even know who to be angry at anymore. My mum for the affair and the lies, my uncle for being drunk and reckless enough to blow up everything, my dad for not being able to separate his feelings about my mom from his relationship with my sister. My sister won't talk to me about it. She says she needs space from everyone, that she doesn't know who she is anymore, that everything she thought she knew about her family was fiction. I keep thinking about that moment, that one sentence that changed everything. 75 people watched my family implode in real time, and there's no putting it back together. No amount of apologies or explanations can undo what happened. The photos from the party are still on my mum's phone. Everyone smiling, celebrating, completely unaware that in 20 minutes their entire world would shatter. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been better if the secret had just stayed secret. But then I realize that's a terrible thought. My sister deserved to know the truth. My dad deserved to know the truth. They just didn't deserve to find out like that. Not in front of everyone. Not on what should have been one of the happiest days of my sister's life. My boyfriend told me he had a work trip coming up. 3 days in Miami for a sales conference. He showed me the itinerary his company sent. Sessions on client acquisition, team building dinners, networking events, the whole corporate package. Early morning workshops, evening presentations. He complained about how exhausting it was going to be, how he'd barely have time to sleep. I felt bad for him, told him to try to enjoy the hotel at least, maybe hit the pool if he got a break. He kissed me goodbye, promised he'd text when he could, and left for the airport. The first day he sent me a few messages, quick updates about how boring the keynote speaker was, how the hotel coffee was terrible, how he missed me. Normal stuff. I told him I loved him and to focus on work. The second day, fewer messages. He said the schedule was packed and he was wiped out. I didn't think anything of it. He was at a conference, of course he was busy. Then my friend Ashley texted me, just a screenshot, no explanation. I opened it and my stomach dropped. It was an Instagram story from someone named Rachel. The photo was her and my boyfriend in bed together. Like, clearly in bed. Sheets pulled up, both of them smiling at the camera, his arm around her. The caption said, "Best weekend babe," with a heart emoji. and she'd tagged him. Tagged his actual Instagram account. I stared at my phone for a solid minute trying to make sense of it. This had to be fake, a mistake. Maybe it was an old photo from before we were together, except I recognized the watch he was wearing. I'd given it to him for his birthday 2 months ago. Ashley sent another message saying Rachel had deleted the story already, but she'd grabbed the screenshot as soon as she saw it. She asked if I was okay. I wasn't okay. I called him immediately. It rang 4 times before he picked up. He sounded out of breath, asked what was wrong. I asked him who Rachel was. There was a pause, too long of a pause. Then he said she was just a coworker, someone from the sales team. Why? I sent him the screenshot, told him to explain what I was looking at. He lost it, started saying Rachel was obsessed with him, that she'd been making advances for months and he'd rejected her every time, that she must have photoshopped this to cause problems between us, that she was a psycho who couldn't take no for an answer. He sounded so convincing, so genuinely upset. He said he'd report her to HR as soon as the conference ended, that he couldn't believe she'd stoop this low. I wanted to believe him. I really did, but something felt off. If she was obsessed and he'd been rejecting her, why wouldn't he have mentioned her before? Why wouldn't he have warned me that some coworker was causing problems? I told him I needed time to think. He kept calling back, leaving voicemails about how much he loved me, how Rachel was trying to ruin his life. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I found Rachel on Instagram. Her account was private, but I could see she worked at the same company. I requested to follow her. She accepted within an hour. I sent her a message, asked her point blank what was going on with my boyfriend. And here's where it gets absurd. She had no idea I existed. She thought they were together, exclusively. She asked me what I was talking about, said they'd been dating for 4 months. I sent her a photo of me and him from last week. Her response was just a string of question marks and angry emojis. Then she started sending me everything. And I mean everything. Videos of them together at different hotels, receipts from room service charged to his company card, screenshots of their text conversations going back to July, messages where he called her baby, made plans to visit her, told her he was falling for her. There were photos from restaurants, bars, another hotel room in Austin, one in Chicago. Every single business trip he'd taken since summer had been with her. The text threads were the worst part. He'd told her the same things he told me, that he loved her, that she was the one, that he'd never felt this way before. There were messages from when he was supposedly at my apartment, telling her goodnight, that he wished he was with her instead of stuck at another boring client dinner. Client dinner. That's what he called our date nights when he was texting her. I felt physically sick reading through it all. 4 months. He'd been living a complete double life for 4 months. I asked Rachel if she knew he was using company money for these trips. She went quiet for a minute, then said she thought the company was paying for everything. That he'd told her his travel expenses were fully covered and he wanted to make the trips more enjoyable by bringing her along. I thanked her for being honest with me. She apologized, said she genuinely had no idea, that she felt like an idiot. I told her we were both idiots and it wasn't her fault he was a liar. Then I sat on my bathroom floor and cried for about an hour. When I finally pulled myself together, I got to work. I packed every single thing he'd left at my apartment. Clothes, toiletries, his PlayStation, that stupid collection of vintage beer signs he was so proud of. Boxed it all up and stacked it in the hallway. Then I called a locksmith, had my locks changed that same day. Cost me $200, but it was worth every penny. He came back from Miami the next evening, texted me that he'd landed and was heading over, that we needed to talk about the Rachel situation and clear everything up. I told him his stuff was in the hallway and he wasn't welcome in my apartment anymore. He showed up anyway, found the boxes, started banging on my door. I didn't answer. He called 12 times, left voicemails that went from apologetic to angry to desperate. I blocked his number, but that wasn't even the worst part. I wasn't done. I compiled everything Rachel had sent me, the receipts, the dates, the hotel charges, cross-referenced them with his supposed work trips. Then I sent it all to his boss with a very polite email explaining that I'd discovered my boyfriend had been misusing company travel funds to bring his girlfriend on personal trips disguised as business expenses. His boss responded within 3 hours, thanked me for bringing it to their attention and said they'd be conducting an immediate investigation. 2 days later, my ex started blowing up my blocked number from different phones, using his friends' phones, even emailing me. He'd been fired. Not just fired, but fired for cause. Misuse of company funds, falsifying expense reports, the whole thing. No severance, no references. They were considering legal action to recover the money. Rachel had blocked me by then. I guess once the initial shock wore off, she realized I was the person who'd gotten both of them in trouble. My ex kept trying to reach me through mutual friends, sent messages saying I'd ruined his life, that he'd lost everything. His job, his apartment since he couldn't pay rent, his car got repossessed. He was crashing on his brother's couch and begging me to talk to him. To help him fix this, if you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because these stories only get wilder from here. Now, back to my ex's pathetic attempts to win me back. Spoiler, they didn't work. He showed up at my work. Security had to escort him out. He sent flowers with cards about how sorry he was, how he'd made a terrible mistake, how he'd do anything to make it right. I returned them all. He tried to friend request me on Facebook from a new account. Blocked. He emailed my mom asking her to convince me to give him another chance. My mom told him to lose her email address. The mutual friends stopped passing along messages after I told them I'd cut off anyone who kept playing Messenger. A few of them said I'd gone too far getting him fired, that he'd made a mistake but didn't deserve to lose everything. I asked them if they'd feel the same way if someone had lied to them for 4 months, stolen from their company, and exposed them to who knows what. They shut up pretty quickly. Last I heard, he's working some retail job and living with his parents in another state. Rachel apparently got a new job and moved on. And me? I'm doing fine. Better than fine, actually. I got a promotion at work, started going to therapy to work through trust issues, adopted a cat, went on a few dates that didn't lead anywhere, but that's okay. I'm not in a hurry. I don't regret any of it. Not the locksmith, not the email to his boss, not blocking him on every platform known to humanity. He made his choices. He lied, he cheated. He stole from his company, and he gambled that I'd never find out. He lost. And honestly, watching his whole carefully constructed house of cards collapse was better than any apology he could have given me. We were all crammed into the main conference room for our quarterly all-hands meeting. You know the type. Mandatory attendance, stale coffee, PowerPoint presentations that could have been emails. About 60 of us squeezed into a room designed for 40. People were standing against the walls, sitting on the floor wherever they could fit. The energy was exactly what you'd expect. Everyone half paying attention, scrolling their phones under the table, counting down the minutes until lunch. Sarah from accounting was up at the front, getting ready to present the quarterly budget update. She's been with the company for maybe 5 years. Pretty quiet, keeps to herself mostly. Does her job, goes home, nothing remarkable. She was fumbling with her laptop trying to get it connected to the projector. Our IT guy was helping her troubleshoot. Classic corporate chaos. Meanwhile, our CEO was sitting front and center, arms crossed, looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. HR was scattered throughout the room taking notes. Department heads were lined up in the front rows. This was the full company audience. Sarah finally got her screen to project. The slide deck popped up. Budget graphs, expense reports, the usual financial breakdown that makes everyone's eyes glaze over. She started her presentation, apologized for the technical difficulties, clicked to the first slide. Everything seemed fine, professional, boring, but fine. She was about 3 slides in when she said she needed to pull up a different document to reference some numbers. Said she'd just quickly share her desktop to grab it. That's when it happened. She minimized the PowerPoint, and her full desktop appeared on the massive projector screen. And right there, taking up a quarter of her screen, was Slack, wide open. And not just open to a direct message thread with Mark from sales. And the preview of the most recent messages was just sitting there, visible to every single person in that room. I'm talking graphic. Like nobody should ever see this at work graphic. The kind of messages you don't even send on your personal phone, let alone on company Slack. Explicit descriptions of things I absolutely cannot repeat here. Photos, thumbnail images that were very clearly not work appropriate. Plans to meet up, times, locations. The supply closet on the 3rd floor was specifically mentioned. Timestamps from earlier that morning. This wasn't old history. This was active, ongoing, happening right now stuff. The room went silent. 60 people, dead quiet. You could hear the air conditioning humming. I watched people's faces change in real time. Confusion, then recognition, then horror. Someone gasped. I think it was from HR. Sarah was still talking, completely oblivious, moving her cursor around looking for the file she needed. She hadn't noticed yet that every single person in the room was staring at her screen in absolute shock. Then someone coughed, loudly, deliberately. Sarah looked up from her laptop at the audience and saw everyone's faces, saw where they were all looking. She glanced back at the projection screen and the color just drained from her face. She went from normal to ghost white in about half a second. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. But that wasn't even the worst part, because sitting in the third row, in the IT section, was Sarah's husband, David. He works in our infrastructure team. He'd been scrolling his phone, half paying attention like everyone else, until the room went quiet. He looked up, saw the screen, saw his wife's Slack messages with another man, saw everything. The messages, the photos, the plans. I watched him stand up slowly like he was moving underwater. His face was completely blank, no expression at all. He just stared at the screen, then at Sarah, then at the screen again. Sarah screamed, actually screamed. Slammed her laptop shut so hard I'm surprised it didn't break. The projection went black. She grabbed her laptop and ran out of the conference room. Just bolted. Left her bag, her phone, everything. We could hear her heels clicking down the hallway at full speed. The room erupted. People were talking over each other, asking what just happened, if that was real. Our CEO stood up and tried to restore order, but nobody was listening. Mark from sales, the guy from the messages, was sitting near the back. I'd never seen someone look so pale. He tried to quietly stand up and slip out the side door. HR saw him, blocked his path, told him to sit back down. He tried to argue, said he had a client call. HR wasn't having it. They told him he wasn't going anywhere until they had a conversation. The CEO called an immediate end to the meeting and told everyone except department heads and HR to clear out. People filed out in this weird, stunned silence. Nobody knew what to say. I went back to my desk, but the entire office was buzzing. Within minutes, our company-wide Slack was going absolutely insane. People were sharing what they saw. Someone had apparently taken a photo of the screen before Sarah closed her laptop. That photo was everywhere. It tried to delete it, but it was too late. Screenshots had already spread to personal phones. Group chats were exploding. The tea was piping hot and everyone was drinking it. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. Within an hour, both Sarah and Mark were called into separate meetings with HR and legal. By the end of the day, both of them were fired. Terminated for inappropriate workplace conduct and misuse of company communication systems. Sarah never came back to her desk. Someone from HR packed up her stuff and had it shipped to her. Mark got escorted out by security. He tried to take his laptop. They wouldn't let him. Company property. David, Sarah's husband, left work early that day. Didn't say anything to anyone. Just grabbed his stuff and walked out. The next week, we heard through the office gossip network that he'd filed for divorce. Served her papers within days. I don't blame him. Finding out your spouse is cheating is bad enough. Finding out in front of your entire workplace, with photo evidence on a projector screen, that's a special kind of nightmare. The fallout was insane. It sent out a company-wide memo about professional communication standards. A reminder that all Slack messages are company property and subject to review. That appropriate conduct extends to all digital communications. It was the most passive-aggressive corporate email I've ever received. Everyone knew exactly what it was referencing. Someone made memes. I wish I was joking. There were memes circulating on personal group chats about always closing your tabs before screen sharing, about checking your Slack before presenting. Dark humor, but that's how people cope, I guess. The whole situation became this legendary office story, the kind of thing that gets brought up at happy hours for years. Sarah and Mark both tried to do damage control on social media. Sarah posted something vague about privacy and respect. Mark just deleted all his accounts. Neither of them could escape it, though. LinkedIn updates showed they'd both left the company. No explanations given. Future employers would eventually find out why. And here's where it gets absurd. Every single meeting after that, whenever someone had to share their screen, the entire room would tense up. People started doing elaborate checks before presenting, closing every tab, every application, triple checking that only the relevant window was visible. Our IT department created a tutorial on how to share just one specific window instead of your whole desktop. It became mandatory viewing for anyone who had to present. I genuinely thought this couldn't get worse. I was wrong, because a few weeks later, we found out that Sarah and Mark weren't the only ones. The HR investigation uncovered that this had been going on for almost 8 months. They'd been using the supply closet, empty conference rooms, even the parking garage. Security footage confirmed it. Multiple instances. They'd been incredibly sloppy, and somehow nobody had caught them until that one catastrophic presentation. The company had to bring in an outside consultant to do workplace culture training. We all had to sit through seminars about appropriate boundaries and professional conduct. It was humiliating, all because 2 people couldn't keep their personal lives separate from work and had zero awareness about digital privacy. To this day, months later, people still bring it up. New hires hear the story within their first week. It's become part of company law, a cautionary tale about always closing Slack before you share your screen. The second-hand embarrassment never fully faded. Every time I'm in that conference room, I think about it. Every time someone shares their screen, there's this collective breath-holding moment where everyone silently prays nothing inappropriate pops up. The whole thing could have been avoided. A simple screen check, sharing one window instead of the whole desktop. Basic digital hygiene. But instead, 2 careers ended, a marriage imploded, and an entire company got traumatized in under 60 seconds. All broadcast in high definition on a projector screen to an audience of 60 witnesses, including the CEO, HR, and the betrayed spouse. You almost have to admire the spectacular level of carelessness it took to create that perfect storm of disaster. Almost. I used to work at a mid-sized marketing firm. Decent pay, good benefits, mostly reasonable co-workers. But there was this one thing that drove everyone absolutely insane. Every single month without fail, our boss Dan would announce Employee of the Month. And every single month, it was the same person. Jessica from accounts. Now, if Jessica was some kind of superhuman productivity machine, that would be one thing. But she wasn't. She showed up late at least 3 days a week, rolled in around 10 when the rest of us were expected at 8:30 sharp. She'd miss deadlines constantly, then blame it on other departments or claim the timeline was unrealistic. Half the time when you needed her for something urgent, she was mysteriously unavailable, out for a client meeting, on a call, working from a coffee shop because the office was too distracting. Meanwhile, the rest of us were drowning. I was pulling 10-hour days trying to cover campaigns she'd dropped the ball on. My coworker Marcus was handling client complaints that originated from her mistakes. Another teammate stayed late 3 nights a week just to meet deadlines Jessica had blown past. But every month there she was at the all-hands meeting, getting a plaque and a $200 bonus, while Dan praised her innovative thinking and client-focused approach. The thing that really got me was how blatant it was. She'd literally be scrolling through Instagram at her desk, and if Dan walked by, he'd smile and tell her to keep up the great work. She'd submit reports with typos and missing data, and he'd call them thorough and insightful. The rest of us would submit flawless work and get a thanks. Looks good in response. It was so obviously favoritism that people started making jokes about it. Dark jokes, bitter jokes, the kind you make when you're too tired to be professionally outraged anymore. I tried talking to Dan about it once, very diplomatically. Said I'd noticed Jessica seemed to have a lighter workload and asked if there was a reason for the distribution. He got weirdly defensive. Said Jessica was handling high-level strategic work that wasn't as visible as day-to-day tasks, that she was being groomed for leadership and needed flexibility to develop her skills. I asked what strategic work specifically. He couldn't name a single project. That's when I started paying attention, really paying attention. I created a simple spreadsheet, tracked what time Jessica arrived each day, what time she left, how long she was away from her desk, what meetings she attended, her project deliverables and their quality. It started as just venting, honestly, a way to validate my own frustration with data. But patterns started emerging pretty quickly. She was showing up late an average of 4 days per week, sometimes an hour late, sometimes two. She'd leave early at least twice a week, usually around 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And those client meetings she was always running off to, I cross-referenced them with our client database and project schedules. Most of them didn't exist. There were no clients scheduled, no projects that required her presence. She was just gone for 2 or 3 hours in the middle of the day with no accountability. Then I noticed something else. I pulled up Dan's calendar, which was visible to the whole team through our shared system. He had these recurring blocks marked as external meetings. No details, just external meeting, from 1 to 3 p.m., 2 or 3 times a week. I checked the dates against Jessica's absences. Perfect overlap. Every single time Jessica was gone for a mystery client meeting, Dan had an external meeting scheduled at the exact same time. That's when everything clicked. This wasn't favoritism. This was an affair. I started looking closer, checked the parking garage sign-out logs, which tracked when employee keycards were used to exit. My friend Ryan worked security and owed me a favor, so I asked him to pull the footage from the garage cameras for the past month. Sure enough, there they were. Dan and Jessica, leaving together in his car during those external meeting windows, coming back together 2 hours later. Same car, every single time. They weren't even being subtle about it. They'd leave within 5 minutes of each other, meet at his car and drive off. Sometimes they'd come back with coffee cups from the same cafe. Once I saw them laughing as they walked back into the building, and she playfully shoved his shoulder. I felt sick watching it, not because I cared about Dan's personal life, but because this explained everything. The unearned recognition, the immunity from consequences, the bonuses while the rest of us scraped by. I spent 2 weeks compiling everything: Jessica's attendance records, her project outcomes compared to others on the team. The calendar overlaps, screenshots of the parking garage footage with timestamps, a breakdown of every employee of the month selection for the past 8 months, cross-referenced with actual performance metrics. It was 40 pages of documentation, thorough, factual, impossible to dismiss. Then I sent it, anonymously, to corporate HR with a detailed cover letter explaining the pattern of favoritism and suspected relationship between a supervisor and direct report, which violated about 6 different company policies. I also sent a copy to Dan's wife. I found her on Facebook, created a burner account, and messaged her the entire file with a note that said, "I thought you should know what your husband does during his external meetings." I won't lie, that second part was petty, but I was so tired of watching someone cheat the system while the rest of us suffered. And yeah, maybe I wanted him to feel consequences beyond just a slap on the wrist at work. HR moved fast. They launched an investigation within 3 days, interviewed the whole team individually, pulled calendar records, email logs, expense reports. Turned out Dan had been charging some of those afternoon excursions to his corporate card, lunches at nice restaurants, hotel rooms twice when they apparently needed somewhere more private than his car. The company was not thrilled about that, and here's where it gets absurd. During the investigation, Jessica tried to throw Dan under the bus, told HR he'd pressured her into the relationship, that she felt uncomfortable but didn't know how to say no because he controlled her performance reviews. Dan, meanwhile, told them it was entirely consensual and that he'd never let it affect his professional judgment. They were both lying, and HR saw right through it. Dan got fired, not quietly resigned, not mutually agreed to part ways. Fired for ethics violations, misuse of company funds, and creating a hostile work environment. Jessica got transferred to a different department in another office 2 hours away. Technically, she kept her job, but she lost all her seniority and took a pay cut. Her new boss apparently actually holds her accountable, and from what I've heard through the grapevine, she's struggling hard. But that wasn't even the most satisfying part. Dan's wife filed for divorce immediately, took the house, the car, majority custody of their 2 kids. He's apparently living in a 1-bedroom apartment now and paying a ton in child support. His LinkedIn says he's freelancing, which I'm pretty sure means unemployed. The company brought in a new manager for our department. Her name's Patricia, and she's incredible. Actually looks at performance data when making decisions, distributes work fairly, gives credit where it's due. The first time she announced Employee of the Month, it went to Marcus, who'd been putting in insane hours for over a year with zero recognition. He teared up a little when she called his name. That moment made the whole thing worth it. Some people figured out it was me who reported them. I never confirmed it, but a few coworkers thanked me privately, said they'd wanted to say something for months but didn't have the evidence or the guts. One guy bought me lunch and just said, "You did what we all wanted to do. I don't feel guilty about any of it." Dan abused his position. Jessica exploited it. They both made choices that hurt everyone around them, and they did it with complete disregard for how unfair it was. The fact that it took someone documenting their behavior for 40 pages before anyone acted is honestly the more depressing part of this story. These days, work is actually tolerable. People get recognized for actual contributions. Workload is distributed based on capacity and skill, not who's sleeping with the boss. Morale is better. Turnover dropped. Turns out when you remove toxic leadership and hold people accountable, the whole environment improves. Wild concept. Dan tried to connect with me on LinkedIn a few months ago. I declined. Jessica sent me a Facebook message once, asking if I was the one who reported them. I left her on red. They made their choices. They can live with the consequences. I got my girlfriend an AirTag a few months back. Not because I'm some controlling person, but because she loses her keys at least twice a week. She'd be late for work, tearing apart the apartment, checking coat pockets, dumping out her purse. It was becoming a genuine problem. So I got her one of those AirTag keychains, thought it would make her life easier. She loved it. Thought it was really thoughtful. Said it would save her so much stress. I set it up on my Find My app so either of us could locate her keys if they went missing. For a while it was great, worked exactly as intended. She'd misplace her keys, open the app, realize they were in the bathroom or under a couch cushion. Problem solved. I never really looked at the app unless she asked me to help find them. It wasn't something I thought about, just a helpful tool sitting there in the background. Then came a random Tuesday night. She told me she was going to her sister's place for a girls' night. They did this pretty regularly. Wine, gossip, reality TV, the usual. She'd usually stay pretty late, sometimes even crash there if they were drinking. I told her to have fun, be safe. She kissed me goodbye and left around 7. I ordered takeout, settled in to watch a game, figured I'd have a quiet night to myself. Around 10, I was scrolling my phone during halftime. Bored. Just mindlessly opening apps. I don't even know why I opened Find My. Habit maybe? Curiosity. But I did. And I saw her location, except she wasn't at her sister's place. The pin was showing a completely different part of town. I zoomed in. It was an apartment building, an address I recognized immediately because I'd been there before for a work event. My boss's apartment building. I stared at my phone thinking there had to be a glitch. GPS errors happen. Maybe the location was lagging or the pin dropped wrong. I closed the app and reopened it. Refreshed. The pin stayed exactly where it was. My boss's building. I checked the timestamp. Last updated 2 minutes ago. She was there right now. My brain went into overdrive trying to rationalize it. Maybe her sister lived in the same building and I didn't know. Maybe they were visiting someone else who lived there. Maybe it was a complete coincidence, but my gut was screaming that something was very wrong. I grabbed my keys and drove over. Took me about 15 minutes. The whole drive I was telling myself I was being paranoid, that there would be a perfectly logical explanation. I pulled into the visitor parking lot and my stomach dropped. Her car was there. Parked in a visitor spot. No mistake. Her license plate, her bumper stickers, everything. I sat in my car for a minute just staring at it. Then I called her. She picked up on the third ring, music and voices in the background. She sounded cheerful. Asked what was up. I asked how girls' night was going. She said great, they were watching some show, having wine. Said she was still at her sister's. I told her that was interesting because I could see her location and she was actually at an apartment building across town. Dead silence. The background noise cut off like she'd moved to another room. She asked what I was talking about. I repeated myself. Told her I could see her exact location on Find My. That her car was in the parking lot where I was currently sitting. More silence. Then she hung up on me. I sat there in shock. She just hung up. No explanation, no denial, just ended the call. I tried calling back, straight to voicemail. She'd turned off her phone. I got out of my car and started walking toward the building entrance. I didn't have a plan. Didn't know what I was going to do. I was just moving on autopilot, angry and confused and feeling sick. Then my phone rang. My boss, calling me at 10:15 on a Tuesday night. I answered. He was talking fast, stumbling over his words. Started with, "Hey man, I know this looks bad," which is exactly what you say when something is very bad. He said my girlfriend had come over to talk about career advice, that she was thinking about switching industries and wanted his perspective since he'd made a similar move years ago, that it was purely professional, mentorship, networking, nothing inappropriate. I asked him why she'd lied about where she was, why she'd told me she was at her sister's if this was just innocent career advice, why she'd hung up on me and turned off her phone. He didn't have an answer for that, just kept repeating that nothing was going on, that I was misunderstanding the situation. I told him I quit. He started backtracking, saying, "Let's talk about this tomorrow when everyone's calmer." I hung up. I drove home. My girlfriend showed up about an hour later. Let herself in with her keys, the ones with the AirTag that had just exposed everything. She tried to explain. Said exactly what my boss had said. Career mentorship, professional advice. She didn't tell me because she knew I'd overreact. She turned off her phone because she was embarrassed and needed time to think. The whole script sounded rehearsed, like they'd coordinated their stories in that hour. I asked her why she needed career advice at 10 o'clock at night, why she couldn't have met him for coffee during normal hours, why this required lying to me about girls' night with her sister. She got defensive, said I was being controlling and paranoid, that the AirTag proved I didn't trust her, that I was tracking her movements like some psycho. I pointed out that she'd loved the AirTag when I gave it to her, that it was for her keys, not surveillance, that I only checked it randomly and happened to see something that didn't add up. Things went from bad to unhinged. She started crying, saying I was ruining her life over nothing, that she was trying to advance her career and I was being unsupportive, that my boss was a valuable connection and I was jeopardizing her future. I told her to get out. She refused, said it was her apartment too. Technically it wasn't. The lease was in my name. She'd moved in 6 months ago, but never got added officially. I told her she had until the end of the week to find somewhere else. She moved out 3 days later, didn't say much, just packed her stuff while I was at work and left her key on the counter. Took the AirTag off her keychain and left that too, like it had personally betrayed her. I found out later she'd been seeing my boss for at least 2 months. Someone from work reached out and told me they'd noticed them leaving together multiple times. Long lunches that turned into afternoons, late night office hours when nobody else was around. Everyone apparently knew except me. I followed through on quitting, submitted my resignation the next morning. 2 weeks' notice, professional and clean. HR asked for an exit interview. I told them everything, showed them the timeline, the text messages from that night, laid out the whole situation. They said they'd look into it. My boss got reported for fraternizing with someone who could potentially become his employee, since my girlfriend had apparently been inquiring about positions at the company. Conflict of interest, abuse of power dynamics. The whole thing became a mess for him. I started job hunting immediately, had 3 interviews within a week, got an offer from a competitor with a 20% salary bump and better benefits. Took it without hesitation. Started 2 weeks after my last day at the old place. My new boss is professional, keeps clear boundaries, and definitely isn't sleeping with anyone's girlfriend. My ex kept texting me for weeks. Paragraphs about how I misunderstood everything, how it really was just mentorship, and I'd destroyed her reputation by going to HR. How my boss was just being nice, and I'd gotten him in trouble over nothing. She used the word mentorship so many times, it lost all meaning. Sure, Jan. Mentorship that required lying, late-night apartment visits, and coordinated cover stories. Totally normal professional development. The reality is she wanted to have her cake and eat it too. Keep me around for stability while exploring whatever was happening with my boss. The AirTag I gave her to be helpful ended up being the thing that exposed it all. The irony isn't lost on me. She probably cursed that little piece of technology every day after. Last I heard, she didn't end up getting a job at my old company. HR's investigation made that impossible. My former boss got a formal warning but kept his position. Office gossip said people lost respect for him though. Hard to take someone seriously as a leader when everyone knows the details of their messy personal life. They might still be seeing each other. I don't know, and I don't care. I'm doing fine now. Better than fine. Better job, better pay, better apartment. Started seeing someone new who doesn't require GPS tracking because she just tells me where she is like a normal person. The whole situation taught me that sometimes the trash takes itself out. You just have to pay attention to what the evidence is telling you. And if someone ever tries to sell you the mentorship excuse, run. Nobody needs career advice that badly. We were having a regular night in, nothing special, just me and my boyfriend on the couch, trying to decide what to watch on Netflix. He'd had a long day at work and I'd made dinner. We were in that comfortable routine couple phase where you don't even have to talk much. You just exist together and it's nice. He was scrolling through options on his phone while the TV was already on, trying to find something we'd both actually want to watch instead of spending 40 minutes browsing. His phone was connected to our smart TV via Bluetooth. We'd set it up months ago so we could easily stream music or cast videos. Usually it worked fine. We'd gotten used to the convenience of it. He'd play his Spotify through the TV speakers, I'd cast YouTube videos, normal stuff. Neither of us thought anything of it being automatically connected whenever his phone was in range. We finally settled on some crime documentary. He pressed play and set his phone down on the coffee table. The Netflix menu disappeared and the show started loading. Then suddenly the screen went black for a second. I thought maybe the app had crashed or the internet was buffering, but then audio started playing through our TV speakers. Crystal clear, full surround sound. And it wasn't the documentary. It was a voice memo. My boyfriend's voice talking to someone. I recognized it immediately. At first, I thought maybe he'd accidentally hit play on a voice note someone sent him. It happens. Technology glitches. But then I actually heard what he was saying. He was talking to his friend Chris. I recognized Chris's voice responding. They were having a conversation, and my boyfriend was describing in explicit detail how he'd been hooking up with his ex-girlfriend. Not once. Multiple times. He talked about where they'd meet, when they'd started again, how the sex was different now than when they dated before, how he felt guilty every time he came home to me afterward. I sat there completely frozen. My brain couldn't process what I was hearing. This had to be a joke, a prank, something. But he kept talking, told Chris he didn't know how to end things with me because I was too good to him, that I didn't deserve this, that he knew he was being a piece of garbage, but he couldn't seem to stop seeing her, that every time he tried to cut it off with his ex, she'd text him and he'd cave. Chris asked him why he didn't just break up with me if he wanted to be with her. My boyfriend said he didn't want to be with her, not really. That it was just physical. That I was the one he actually loved. The one he saw a future with. But his ex knew him in ways I didn't, understood parts of him from their history together, and he was addicted to that familiarity. The whole time this voice memo was playing, my boyfriend was staring at the TV in absolute horror. His face went from confused to pale to panicked in about 3 seconds. He lunged for his phone on the coffee table, grabbing it and frantically trying to stop the playback. But his hands were shaking so badly he kept mistyping his passcode. The memo kept playing, more details, dates, times, how many times they'd been together, how careful he'd been to hide it. By the time he finally got his phone unlocked and stopped the audio, I'd heard at least 2 full minutes of his confession. The TV went silent. The Netflix loading screen was still frozen on the display. We both just sat there. I couldn't look at him, couldn't move. My whole body felt numb. He started trying to explain, talking fast, stumbling over words, said the voice memo was old, that it was taken out of context, that he'd been venting to Chris about a hypothetical situation, not a real one, that it was from before we got serious. The lies were so transparent, so desperate, that it was almost insulting. I'd heard the memo. He'd mentioned specific recent dates, referenced things that had happened in the past 2 months. I asked him to leave. Just said it very quietly. Leave. He started crying. Actually crying, saying he was sorry, that he'd made a terrible mistake, that he loved me, that he'd end things with his ex right now, immediately, if I'd just give him a chance to fix this. He reached for my hand and I pulled away like he'd burned me. He kept begging, pleading, saying he didn't know why he'd done it, that it meant nothing, that I was the only person who mattered. I stood up, walked to our bedroom and started packing a bag. He followed me, still talking, still apologizing. I grabbed clothes, toiletries, my laptop, moved on autopilot. He stood in the doorway asking where I was going, saying we needed to talk about this. I told him there was nothing to talk about, that I'd heard everything I needed to hear in his own words, in his own voice, that he'd had plenty of opportunities to tell me the truth, and instead he'd lied to my face for months while sleeping with someone else. He tried to block the bedroom door. I told him if he didn't move, I'd call the police. He moved. I drove to my sister's apartment. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside. I told her everything, played her the portion of the voice memo I'd managed to record on my phone before he stopped it. She was furious, called him every name in the book, made me tea and set up her guest room, and let me cry for about 3 hours straight. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from him, text messages filling my phone, long paragraphs about how sorry he was, how he'd do anything to make it right, how he'd deleted his ex's number, blocked her on everything, scheduled a therapy appointment, how losing me made him realize I was the only person he'd ever truly loved. Then the flowers started arriving. At my work, at my sister's apartment. He somehow figured out where I was staying, bouquets with apology cards, voice notes sent through every messaging app I hadn't blocked him on yet, messages from his friends telling me I should hear him out, that he was devastated, that everyone makes mistakes. That's when everything unraveled, because I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done, completely, totally done. I blocked his number, blocked him on every social media platform, told his friends to stop contacting me or I'd block them too, sent his mother, who'd called to advocate for him, a very polite message saying I appreciated her concern, but this wasn't her business. His ex called me, actually had the nerve to call me, said she wanted to apologize that she didn't know he was still with me, that he'd told her we'd broken up. I asked her when he'd supposedly told her that. She said 2 months ago. I told her we'd literally been on vacation together 6 weeks ago and hung up. The lies had layers. Both of them had been lying, to me and apparently to each other. I found out later from a mutual friend that his ex had seen my Instagram posts of us together the entire time. She'd known. She just hadn't cared, and he'd been telling her I was just a casual thing, that we weren't serious. Meanwhile, he'd been telling me he wanted to move in together, had been looking at rings. The most pathetic part was how he kept trying. Showed up at my work once, security escorted him out, sent letters to my sister's address, long handwritten apologies about his issues with commitment and fear of vulnerability. Pop psychology nonsense that blamed everyone but himself. I didn't read past the first page. His friends eventually stopped reaching out. The flower deliveries stopped. The messages slowed down and then stopped entirely. I heard through mutual connections that he and his ex had tried to make it work officially. Lasted about 6 weeks before imploding. Turns out a relationship built on cheating and lies doesn't have a great foundation. I moved out of our apartment, broke the lease and ate the penalty because I couldn't stand being in that space anymore. Every room reminded me of the life I'd thought we were building together. My sister helped me move my stuff while he was at work, left my key on the counter and nothing else. Technology really said not today, cheater. If his phone hadn't auto-connected to that TV, if that voice memo hadn't started playing at that exact moment, I might have never found out. I could have wasted years with someone who clearly didn't respect me enough to be honest. Could have moved in with him, maybe even married him, while he continued doing whatever he wanted behind my back. Instead, I got the truth delivered in surround sound on a random Tuesday night. And, yeah, it destroyed me for a while. I cried a lot, questioned everything, wondered if I'd missed signs, but eventually I realized this wasn't about me. I didn't do anything wrong. I was exactly what he said I was, too good to him, and he took advantage of that. These days, I'm doing better. Therapy helped, time helped. My sister's spare room helped. I'm in my own place now. Dated a little, nothing serious yet, but I'm not in a hurry. I'm rebuilding trust in myself, in my judgment. Learning what red flags actually look like instead of what I convinced myself were quirks. And every time I set up a Bluetooth connection on any device, I triple check what's paired and what's playing. Lesson learned. 2 weeks before my wedding, I was in full planning mode. Final dress fitting scheduled, seating chart finalized, vendor confirmations coming in. The kind of busy where you're stressed but excited. Everything was falling into place. My fiancé had just gotten back from his guy's weekend, some cabin trip with his groomsmen to celebrate before the wedding. He'd posted a few photos on Instagram. Typical guy stuff. Beers, poker, someone's attempt at grilling steaks. It looked fun and harmless. I was at work when Jake, my fiancé's best man, texted me. We'd been in touch a lot during wedding planning since he was handling the bachelor party, and coordinating the groomsmen. He sent, "Can't wait for the big day," with a photo attachment. I smiled and opened it, expecting maybe a funny picture of the guys in their suit fittings or some joke about wedding planning stress. Instead, my screen filled with a photo of my fiancée kissing another woman. Not a peck, a full-on, hands-on-her-face romantic kiss. They were at a bar. She was sitting on a stool, he was standing between her legs, and they were completely absorbed in each other. My brain couldn't process it. I stared at my phone trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My phone buzzed again. Jake. "Oh my God, that was meant for the group chat, I'm so sorry." Then immediately after, "Please call me, I can explain." Then, "I didn't mean for you to see it like this." I sat in my office with the door closed, shaking. My mind was racing. This had to be old. A photo from before we were together that somehow got mixed into recent pictures. There was an explanation. There had to be. I called my fiancé. He picked up on the second ring, sounding cheerful. Asked how my day was going. I asked him about the photo Jake just sent me. Silence. Long silence. Then he asked what photo. I described it. He went quiet again, then said it was from years ago, before we even met, that Jake must have found an old picture and sent it by accident. His voice was steady, but something felt rehearsed about it. I wanted to believe him. I was 2 weeks away from marrying this man. We'd sent out 200 invitations. My dress was hanging in my closet. The venue was booked. But something told me to dig deeper. I texted Jake, asked him point blank when the photo was taken. He called me immediately. He sounded awful, said he didn't know how to tell me this, that he'd been struggling with it all weekend, that the photo was from 3 days ago, from the guy's weekend, that my fiancé had met up with this woman at the bar they'd gone to on the second night, and Jake had taken the photo to show the other groomsmen what was happening, that they'd confronted my fiancé about it, and he'd brushed them off, said it was nothing, that I'd never find out. I asked Jake to send me the photo metadata, the technical details that show when and where a picture was taken. He sent it within minutes. The photo was taken 3 days ago. Time stamped at 11:42 p.m. Location tagged at a bar 2 hours from where the cabin was. My fiancé had told me they were staying in all weekend, just guys hanging out. No bars, no going out. I felt like I was going to throw up. I called my fiancé back, told him I had the metadata, that I knew it was from this past weekend, asked him to tell me the truth. He tried to stick to his story for about 30 seconds before it fell apart. Then he admitted it, said he'd run into an ex-girlfriend at the bar, that they'd had a few drinks and things got out of hand for a minute, that it was just a kiss, nothing more, that he'd immediately regretted it and it would never happen again. I asked him why he was at a bar when he told me they were staying at the cabin. He said they'd decided last minute to go out, and he didn't mention it because he knew I'd worry about them drinking and driving. I asked if the other groomsmen saw him with this woman. He admitted they did. I asked if anyone had tried to stop him. He went quiet. Then came the breaking point. I asked him for her name. He refused to tell me, said it didn't matter, that it was over and done with. I told him if he wanted any chance of saving this, he needed to be completely honest with me. He gave me her first name. I found her on Instagram in about 2 minutes, cross-referenced her with his followers, found recent photos of them together from the bar. She'd posted them, tagged the location. There were multiple photos, them talking, laughing, his hand on her waist, the kiss Jake had photographed. She'd captioned it reconnecting with my favorite person. I called off the wedding that night, just decided, 2 weeks out, deposits already paid, guests already planning travel. I didn't care. I couldn't marry someone who'd cheat on me 2 weeks before our wedding and then lie about it repeatedly. My mom tried to talk me into postponing instead of cancelling, said maybe we just needed time to work through it, that cold feet makes people do stupid things. I told her this wasn't cold feet, this was betrayal. The next few days were a nightmare, calling vendors, cancelling everything I could. Most deposits were non-refundable, the venue, the caterer, the photographer. I lost thousands of dollars, had to send a mass message to all our guests explaining the wedding was cancelled. Didn't give details, just said it wasn't happening and we were sorry for any inconvenience. But that wasn't even the worst part. My fiancé started a smear campaign, told his family and friends that Jake had sabotaged our relationship because he was jealous, that the photo was taken out of context and I'd overreacted, that Jake had always had a problem with me and wanted to ruin the wedding. Some people believed him. I got messages from his relatives saying I was making a huge mistake, that all men mess up sometimes, that I was being too harsh. Jake sent me a long message apologizing for how everything went down, said he'd been torn all weekend about whether to tell me, that he'd taken the photo as evidence in case my fiancée tried to deny it later, and he'd planned to talk to me privately, that sending it in a text was an accident. He'd meant to send a different photo to me and had the bar photo queued to send to the groomsmen group chat to discuss what to do, that his phone had gotten them mixed up. I told Jake I believed him and that I was grateful he'd told me, even if it was accidentally. He said my fiancée had cut him off completely, uninvited him from the wedding before I'd even officially cancelled it, told all their mutual friends that Jake was a liar and a terrible friend. Jake lost several friendships over it. People took sides. The friend group imploded. Then the woman from the photo reached out to me on Instagram. She'd seen the cancelled wedding posts and put two and two together. She had no idea my fiancé was engaged. He'd told her he was single, that he'd been thinking about her since they broke up years ago, that running into her at that bar felt like fate. She sent me screenshots of their text conversations. He'd been messaging her for weeks, since before the guys' weekend. He'd planned to see her. It wasn't a random encounter. We ended up talking on the phone for over an hour. She was horrified, apologized profusely even though none of it was her fault. She genuinely believed he was available. We bonded over what a liar he was. She's actually cool. We got coffee a few weeks later and now we're friends, which is weird but also kind of perfect. We both dodged the same bullet. My ex kept trying to contact me for months, sent letters, emails, showed up at my apartment, claimed he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, that he wanted to go to counseling, prove he could change, that losing me made him realize what he'd thrown away. I never responded, blocked him everywhere, returned the engagement ring through his mother. Last I heard, he's still single, moved to a different city for work, lost most of his friend group in the fallout. Jake's no longer his friend, obviously. Most of the groomsmen sided with Jake once they heard the full story. A few people still believe my ex's version, where he's the victim, but most saw through it. I'm doing fine now, better than fine. I'm grateful I found out before the wedding instead of after. Grateful Jake accidentally sent me that photo, even though it was devastating at the time. Imagine marrying someone capable of that level of deception. The trash really did take itself out, and every time someone asks me about my almost wedding, I tell them the truth. Technology and an accidental text message saved me from the worst mistake of my life. I left work early one day because I was feeling awful. Headache, nausea, the whole thing. Figured I was coming down with something and didn't want to spread it around the office. My boss told me to go home and rest. I texted my girlfriend to let her know I was heading back, but my phone died right after I sent it. Didn't think much of it. I just wanted to get home, take some medicine, and sleep. I got to our apartment around 2 in the afternoon, used my key to get in. The place was quiet. I called out to let her know I was home. No response. I figured maybe she had headphones in or was taking a nap. She didn't have classes on Wednesdays, so it wasn't unusual for her to be home. I walked toward our bedroom and noticed the door was closed. That was weird. We never closed the bedroom door during the day unless we were changing or on a call. I tried the handle. Locked. Even weirder. I knocked and called her name. There was a pause, then I heard her voice, but she sounded off. Panicked almost. She said she was changing and would be out in a minute. Changing at 2 in the afternoon when she'd been home all day didn't make sense, but I was tired and felt like garbage, so I didn't push it. I told her I was sick and came home early. Another pause. She said, okay, just give her a second. I stood there waiting and something felt wrong. The energy was wrong. Her voice was wrong. I pulled out my key ring. We each had keys to the bedroom door because the lock was one of those privacy ones that could be opened from the outside with the little emergency key. I unlocked the door and opened it. My girlfriend was standing in the middle of the room, fully dressed in the same outfit she'd been wearing that morning. Not changing, just standing there looking absolutely terrified. And the closet door, our walk-in closet, was open just a crack. Not how we normally left it. I looked at her, looked at the closet, back at her, asked what was going on. She said nothing. Voice shaking, said everything was fine. I walked over to the closet and opened the door, and there he was, Josh, her study partner from her economics class, crammed into our closet between my jackets and her dresses, shirtless, holding his shoes, just standing there like if he stayed quiet enough, I might not see him. We made eye contact. Nobody said anything for what felt like a full minute. Then I asked what he was doing in my closet. My girlfriend jumped in immediately, started talking fast, said Josh had come over to study and needed a quiet place to focus, away from his noisy roommates, that our apartment was quieter, that she was helping him prepare for an exam. I looked at her, looked at Josh, shirtless, hiding in a closet with his shoes in his hands, asked her why he was in the closet then, why he didn't have a shirt on, why the bedroom door was locked. She tried to say he'd gotten hot while studying and took his shirt off, that he'd gone to the closet to grab it when he heard me come in and panicked because he didn't want it to look weird. The lies were so bad they were almost impressive. She was really trying to sell the idea that her study partner had been casually studying shirtless in our bedroom, and his first instinct when her boyfriend came home was to hide in the closet. I told them both to get out. Josh scrambled to grab his shirt from somewhere near the bed, put it on inside out, mumbled something that might have been an apology, and rushed past me. I heard the front door open and close. My girlfriend started crying, saying it wasn't what it looked like, that I was overreacting, that nothing had happened. I asked her how long. She said what? I repeated myself. How long had this been going on? She insisted nothing was going on, that today was the first time anything had even almost happened, that they'd just kissed, that she'd stopped it before it went further, that she felt terrible and that's why she'd been acting weird. The closet thing was Josh panicking, not proof of anything serious. I didn't believe a word. The locked door, his missing shirt, the guilt all over her face. This wasn't the first time. This was just the first time she'd gotten caught. I started pulling her stuff out of drawers, clothes, toiletries, whatever I could grab. She asked what I was doing. I told her I was packing her things, that she needed to leave. She started crying harder, saying I was being crazy, that we needed to talk about this, that she loved me. I kept packing, filled 2 bags with her stuff and carried them to the front door, set them outside in the hallway, came back for more. She followed me around the apartment, begging me to listen, to calm down, to let her explain. I told her there was nothing to explain, that I'd come home sick and found another man hiding shirtless in our closet, that whatever explanation she had wasn't going to make that okay. Then came the breaking point. She grabbed my arm and said fine, they'd been seeing each other, but it was my fault, that I'd been distant lately, that I worked too much and didn't pay enough attention to her, that Josh made her feel appreciated, that she'd been planning to end it but didn't know how. Classic cheater logic. Blame the person you betrayed for your choices. I shook off her hand and told her to leave. She refused, said it was her apartment too. She was right, technically. We'd both signed the lease, but I told her if she didn't leave voluntarily, I'd call the police and report a disturbance. She could come back for the rest of her stuff with an escort later, but right now she needed to go. She stared at me like she couldn't believe I was serious, then grabbed her bags from the hallway and left. Slammed the door hard enough that something fell off the wall in the other room. Over the next few weeks, she tried everything. Texting, calling, showing up at my work, sending me long emails about how sorry she was, how she'd made a mistake, how we could get past this if I just talked to her. I didn't respond to any of it. Changed our lock so she couldn't let herself in. Had a friend help her collect the rest of her stuff while I wasn't home. Blocked her number after the messages became too much. A mutual friend eventually told me the truth. They'd been together for 5 months. Not a one-time kiss, not an almost mistake. 5 months of a full relationship behind my back. Meeting up between classes, texting constantly. The whole thing. Josh had apparently told some people they were together, which is how it eventually got back to his girlfriend. She had no idea either. Josh's girlfriend reached out to me about a month later, found me on social media and sent a message. Said she'd heard what happened and wanted to compare notes. We met for coffee. Turned out Josh had been feeding her the same lies, that nothing was serious with my ex, that they were just friends, that his girlfriend was overreacting. She'd dumped him the second she found out the truth. We ended up having this surreal conversation about the whole situation. 2 people who'd been betrayed by the same pair of liars, laughing about how ridiculous it all was. She told me stories about times Josh had been weird or distant, and things suddenly made sense to her. I shared moments when my ex had been sketchy that I'd ignored. We'd both missed signs because we'd trusted people who didn't deserve it. She said she'd driven past my ex and Josh together at a restaurant once. Confronted him about it, and he'd said it was a study group at a romantic Italian place at night, just the two of them, and she'd believed him because she'd wanted to. I told her about all the late study sessions my ex had claimed to have, the group projects that required evening meetings, the economics exam she'd been so stressed about that required hours of tutoring from Josh specifically. We both felt like idiots, but we also realized we weren't idiots. We'd been lied to by people who'd gotten very good at lying. They'd had practice, they'd coordinated stories, they'd covered for each other. You can't catch someone who's actively deceiving you unless they mess up, and they'd finally messed up badly enough to get caught. Last I heard, my ex and Josh tried to make it official after we both dumped them. Lasted maybe 2 months before imploding. Turns out relationships built on cheating and lying don't suddenly become healthy just because they're out in the open. Trust issues, guilt, constant suspicion. They broke up badly, very publicly on social media. Mutual friends said it was messy. Josh's ex-girlfriend and I stayed in touch. Not romantically, just as friends who'd survived the same disaster. We'd text occasionally about dating app horror stories, or share memes about terrible exes. She sent me a screenshot once of my ex trying to add her on Instagram. We both blocked her and laughed about the audacity. I'm doing fine now. Better place, better job, better headspace. Started seeing someone new who doesn't require me to check closets before I trust them. The whole situation taught me that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you ends up being the best thing that could have happened. I could have wasted years with someone who clearly didn't respect me. Instead, I got a weird story and a new friend out of the deal, and I never ignore my gut anymore. That feeling I had standing outside the locked bedroom door, that was my instinct screaming at me. I should have listened to that feeling months earlier when things first started seeming off, but at least I listened when it mattered most. My husband called me one afternoon sounding completely panicked, said he'd lost his wallet and had looked everywhere. His car, his office, the gym, our house. Couldn't find it anywhere. He was freaking out about cancelling credit cards and replacing his license. I told him to calm down, reminded him that I'd gotten him one of those AirTag wallet inserts for his birthday, specifically for situations like this. He could just check Find My iPhone and see exactly where it was. There was a pause. He said, "Oh, right, good idea," and that he'd check it and call me back. I thought that was weird. Why wouldn't he just check it right then while we were on the phone? But I was in the middle of work stuff, so I didn't push it. Figured he'd find it in his gym locker or under his car seat, and that would be that. 20 minutes went by. No call back. I texted him asking if he'd found it. No response. 30 minutes. Nothing. An hour later, still nothing. Now I was getting concerned. It's not like him to go radio silent, especially when he'd been so stressed about the wallet. So I opened Find My iPhone on my own phone and checked the location of his AirTag. The pin dropped at a hotel. Not just any hotel, but a nice one about 20 miles from our house. Nowhere near his office, the gym, or any place he'd mentioned being that day. I stared at the location thinking there had to be some mistake. Maybe someone had stolen his wallet and checked into a hotel. That would make sense, right? Thieves use stolen credit cards at hotels all the time. I called him. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. Texted asking why his wallet was showing up at a hotel and why he wasn't answering. No response. That sick feeling started creeping into my stomach. The kind where you know something is very wrong, but your brain is still trying to rationalize it away. I got in my car and drove to the hotel. The whole drive I was telling myself there was a logical explanation. Someone stole it. He was there on business and forgot to mention it. Anything but what I was actually starting to suspect. I walked into the lobby trying to look calm and approached the front desk. Told the clerk my husband had lost his wallet and I was tracking it to this location. Asked if anyone had turned one in. The clerk checked their system and said yes. Actually, a wallet had been turned in to lost and found from one of the rooms. I felt a wave of relief. See? Someone found it and turned it in. Everything was fine. Then the clerk said it was being held with the belongings in room 214, registered under Emily Carter. She was still checked in and they'd return it to her when she checked out, or I could have them call the room if I wanted to collect it now. Emily Carter. I knew exactly who that was. My husband's co-worker. They worked on the same team, traveled to conferences together sometimes, had weekly project meetings. He mentioned her occasionally, but never in any way that seemed suspicious. Just normal work stuff. And now his wallet was in her hotel room. I asked the clerk to call the room. My voice sounded strange even to me. Too calm. The clerk picked up the phone, dialed, and I heard it ring through the receiver. Someone picked up, a man's voice. The clerk asked for Emily Carter. The voice said she was in the shower and asked who was calling. The clerk explained someone was here to collect a lost wallet from the room. There was a pause. Then the voice said he'd bring it down. The clerk hung up and told me someone would be down shortly. I stood in that lobby with my heart pounding, knowing but not wanting to know. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened. My husband walked out, saw me standing there and stopped dead. The color drained from his face. He was holding his wallet. Just standing there in the hotel lobby, 15 feet away from me, holding the wallet he'd called me frantically about losing. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. He walked over stammering, asked what I was doing there. I asked what he was doing there. He said Emily had called him frantic because her dog had run away and she needed help looking for it. That he'd come to help her search and must have dropped his wallet in her hotel room when he stopped by to pick her up. I looked at him and asked why Emily's dog would be anywhere near a hotel 20 miles from where she lived. He said she was staying here temporarily because her apartment was being fumigated. I asked why he didn't mention any of this when he called me about his lost wallet, why he didn't just say it was at Emily's hotel room. He didn't have an answer for that. Then I asked why Emily was in the shower if they were supposed to be out looking for her dog. He started saying she'd just gotten back and needed to clean up. I asked the front desk clerk when the room had been checked in. She checked the system. Yesterday afternoon. Emily had been staying there for over 24 hours. And here's where it gets absurd. I asked my husband to call Emily down to the lobby so we could all discuss her missing dog together. He said she wasn't feeling well and didn't want to be disturbed. I told him to call her right now or I was going to go knock on the door of room 214 myself. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and called her. I could hear her pick up, hear her voice through his phone asking what was wrong. He told her his wife was in the lobby and needed to talk to her. There was a long silence, then she said she'd be right down. 5 minutes later, Emily came out of the elevator looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Her hair was wet. She was wearing hotel slippers. She couldn't make eye contact with me. I asked her about her dog. She looked confused, said she didn't have a dog. I asked why my husband's wallet was in her hotel room. She said he must have left it there yesterday when he stopped by. I asked why he was in her hotel room yesterday. She looked at my husband. He looked at the floor. Nobody said anything. The front desk clerk was pretending to be very focused on her computer, but I could tell she was listening to every word. This whole nightmare was unfolding in a hotel lobby with witnesses and terrible fluorescent lighting. I looked at both of them and said I was filing for divorce, turned around and walked out, got in my car and sat there shaking. My phone started ringing immediately. My husband. I didn't answer. Emily called. Didn't answer. Text messages started flooding in, him saying it wasn't what it looked like, her saying nothing had happened. Both of them with their rehearsed lies that contradicted each other. I drove to my sister's house and told her everything. She helped me find a divorce attorney. I met with one the next week and filed. My husband tried everything to stop it. Showed up at my sister's place, sent flowers, wrote long emails about how Emily was just a friend going through a hard time and he was helping her. That nothing physical had happened. That I was overreacting, except Emily wasn't going through a hard time. Emily was engaged. I found that out from another coworker who reached out when word started spreading about what happened. Emily's fiancé had no idea she was spending nights at hotels with my husband. When he found out, he called off their wedding. Apparently, she'd been telling him she was on work trips. Just like my husband had been telling me he was working late. Things went from bad to unhinged when my husband's company found out. Someone reported the relationship to HR. Company policy prohibited relationships between co-workers on the same team due to conflict of interest. They'd both signed acknowledgement of this policy. HR investigated, found expense reports where my husband had charged dinners and hotel rooms, claiming they were client meetings. They were dates. The company fired him for falsifying expense reports and ethics violations. Emily got transferred to a different office in another state. Her engagement was over. Her reputation at the company was destroyed. My husband lost his job, his marriage, and most of our mutual friends who couldn't believe he'd thrown everything away. The divorce went through. He tried to fight it, then tried to negotiate, then finally just gave up. His lawyer probably told him he had no leg to stand on. I got a fair settlement, kept the house, moved on with my life. The irony of the whole thing still gets me. I gave him that AirTag wallet insert as a thoughtful gift, something practical to help him keep track of his things, and it ended up being the thing that exposed everything. The wallet betrayed him in the most literal way possible. He tried to reach out a few months ago, sent a message saying he'd been in therapy working on himself, that he understood now why he'd sabotaged our marriage, that he hoped someday I could forgive him. I didn't respond. There's nothing left to say. Emily's ex-fiancé actually reached out to me once. We got coffee and compared notes. Turns out they'd been lying to both of us for almost 6 months. Same excuses, same patterns. We laughed about how badly they'd miscalculated everything, how they'd both lost more than they'd gained. These days, I'm doing well, dating someone new who doesn't require GPS tracking to verify his location, who doesn't have mystery hotel rooms or co-workers I need to worry about. The bar is low, but at least it's being met, and I learned that sometimes the worst betrayals come wrapped in the most mundane moments. A lost wallet, a simple phone call, technology doing exactly what it was designed to do. I never thought my wife was big on social media. She had a Facebook account she barely used, an Instagram with maybe 20 followers where she'd post a picture every few months. She always said social media was toxic and performative, that she didn't see the point. I respected that. In a world where everyone's chronically online, it was kind of refreshing to be with someone who wasn't glued to their phone, curating some fake perfect life. Then one day at work, my coworker Derek came up to my desk looking uncomfortable. He asked if my wife was on TikTok. I said no. Why? He pulled out his phone and showed me an account. The username was something generic, just a random combination of words and numbers. The profile picture was an aesthetic shot of a coffee cup, nothing identifying. But the content made my blood run cold. The top video had over 2 million views. The caption said, "Story time. My husband doesn't know I resent him for making me move cities." I watched it. A woman's voice, but not showing her face. Just text on screen and trending audio. She talked about how her husband had gotten a job opportunity and convinced her to move away from her family and friends, how she'd sacrificed her career and social life, how she smiled and pretended everything was fine, but felt trapped and angry every single day. Every detail matched our life. We'd moved 2 years ago for my job. She'd said she was supportive, that it was a good opportunity for us, that we'd make it work. I scrolled through more videos. There were dozens, hundreds of thousands of views on each one. POV, your husband thinks you're happy, but you're planning your exit. When he asks how your day was and you have to pretend you don't hate your life. My husband thinks we're solid, but I've been talking to my ex for months. That last one hit me like a truck. I watched the whole thing. She described reconnecting with an ex on social media, how he understood her in ways I never did, how talking to him reminded her of who she used to be before she gave up everything for her marriage, how she wasn't sure if she was in love with him again or just in love with the idea of escaping. I kept scrolling. The account had been active for over a year, more than 300 videos, all about her miserable marriage, about her clueless husband, about feeling invisible and unappreciated. There were videos about specific fights we'd had, twisted to make me look controlling or dismissive. Videos about our dog, our apartment layout, restaurants we'd been to. She'd been documenting our entire relationship as a tragedy, and millions of strangers had front row seats. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. Thousands of people telling her to leave, calling me every name you can imagine, sharing their own stories of terrible husbands. Some comments were supportive of her venting. Others questioned why she was still in the marriage if she was this unhappy. A few people had apparently figured out who we were. Someone had commented, "I think I know this guy. Does he work in finance?" with a laughing emoji. I felt physically sick. Derek stood there awkwardly while I processed. He said his girlfriend followed the account and had shown him some videos, that when he heard the details, he realized it sounded exactly like my life. He wasn't sure if he should tell me, but decided I had a right to know. I thanked him and left work early. I drove home in a daze. My wife was in the living room watching TV when I walked in. She smiled and asked why I was home early. I pulled out my phone and played one of her videos. Her face went completely white, then red. She asked where I got that. I told her a coworker found it, that millions of people had seen it, that I'd just spent the last hour reading our private life, dissected in comment sections. She went on the defensive immediately. Said it was just venting, that everyone complains about their spouse sometimes, that it was creative storytelling, not literal truth, that I was overreacting. I asked about the ex she'd been talking to. The room went silent. She tried to backtrack, said that was exaggerated for views, that they'd exchanged a few messages but it wasn't serious, that she'd never actually do anything. I asked to see her phone. She refused. Said I was being controlling and proving exactly why she needed an outlet to vent. The irony of calling me controlling while refusing to show me messages with an ex she'd hidden for months wasn't lost on me. And here's where it gets absurd. She started crying and saying I was violating her privacy by watching her TikToks, that they were her personal space to express herself. I pointed out that posting to millions of strangers on a public platform isn't exactly private. She said I wouldn't understand because I didn't appreciate how isolated and unhappy she'd been, that making those videos was therapeutic. I asked her why, if she was so miserable, she'd never actually talked to me about it. Why she'd told millions of internet strangers but not her husband. She said she'd tried, that I never listened. I asked for specific examples. She couldn't give any, just vague claims about me dismissing her feelings or being too focused on work. Things went from bad to unhinged when I told her I wanted her to leave. She refused, said this was her home too, that she wasn't going anywhere over some videos. I told her it wasn't about the videos, it was about the lying, the secret conversations with an ex, the public humiliation, the fact that she'd been performing our marriage as a disaster for strangers while pretending everything was fine to my face. She tried a different approach, started apologizing, said she'd delete the account, that she'd cut off her ex, that we could go to counseling, that she didn't actually want to leave. The videos were just her processing complicated feelings. I asked if she'd already been planning to leave before I found out. She hesitated too long before saying no. I told her to pack a bag. She could stay with friends or family while we figured things out. But I needed space. She finally left, but not before trying to delete the TikTok account on her way out the door. Too late. The internet is forever. People had already screen recorded dozens of her videos. Screenshots of her most viral posts were circulating on Twitter and Reddit. Someone had made a compilation on YouTube. Her family saw. My family saw. Friends we'd had over for dinner saw videos where she complained about hosting them. Co-workers saw videos about hating the city we lived in, the city where they all lived. Her mom called me apologizing, saying she had no idea her daughter felt this way. My mom called furious, asking how I could have been so oblivious to my wife's unhappiness. Nobody won. I filed for divorce 2 weeks later. During the proceedings, her lawyer tried to use my controlling behavior as evidence, citing the TikTok videos as proof. My lawyer brought printouts of every single video she'd made, including the ones about her ex and planning her exit. That shut things down pretty quickly. She'd documented her own infidelity and premeditation. But that wasn't even the most infuriating part. She started making new TikToks, created a new account, same aesthetic, same format. But now the narrative was about surviving a toxic marriage, about escaping an emotionally abusive husband who tried to control her voice, about healing and finding herself after years of manipulation. The comments ate it up, thousands of people supporting her journey, never knowing they were only getting half the story. I thought about making my own account to tell my side. Friends encouraged it, said I should defend myself, but I didn't want to live my life on TikTok, didn't want to turn my divorce into content, didn't want to give her or her followers the satisfaction of a response. So I just existed through it. Watched strangers who'd never met me decide I was a monster based on 60-second videos from someone who'd lied to me for years. The divorce finalized 6 months ago. She got the dog, which still bothers me. I got to keep my dignity and my privacy. Haven't checked her account since. Don't want to know what narrative she's selling now. Mutual friends who stayed in touch with both of us said her relationship with the ex flamed out after a few months. Turns out he was married too. The irony writes itself. I'm doing okay now. Dating again, cautiously. Started therapy to work through trust issues. Every time I meet someone new, there's this moment of paranoia where I wonder if they're documenting everything for social media, if every conversation is being filed away as content, if I'm going to end up as a villain in someone else's story time. My wife turned our marriage into performance art without my consent, and I'm still dealing with the aftermath. But at least I know the truth. And at least I'm not married to someone who needs millions of strangers to validate their feelings instead of just talking to their spouse. When my mum died, the grief was overwhelming. She'd been sick for a while, so we knew it was coming, but knowing doesn't make it easier. After the funeral, after everyone left, I had to go through her things. My dad couldn't do it. My siblings helped for a day or two, then bailed because it was too hard. So it fell to me to sort through decades of belongings in the house I grew up in. I was in her closet pulling down boxes of old photos when I found it. A small wooden box pushed way back on the top shelf, behind shoeboxes and handbags she never used. It had a tiny brass lock on it. I'd never seen it before. I searched for a key, found one in her jewelry box that fit. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to my mother, all from someone named Claire. At first I thought maybe it was an old friend, a pen pal from when Mum was younger. The letters went back years. The earliest one I found was dated from 15 years ago. I started reading, thinking I'd find sweet notes about life and memories. Instead, the first letter I opened started with, "I know this must be difficult to read, but I'm your daughter." I sat down on the closet floor and read the whole thing. Claire explained that she'd been given up for adoption when my mother was 16, that she'd spent years searching for her birth mother and finally found her, that she understood if my mum didn't want contact, but she hoped they could at least exchange letters. She said she had a good life, good adoptive parents, and wasn't looking to disrupt anything. She just wanted to know where she came from. I pulled out another letter, then another. Years of correspondence, Claire writing about her life, getting married, having kids, career milestones, asking questions about family medical history, sharing photos, and my mom had kept every single letter but apparently never responded. Or if she did, she didn't keep copies. Then I found letters from more recent years. Claire's tone had changed. She was more direct, said she'd love to meet in person, that her adoptive mother had passed away and she felt this hole in her life where family should be, that she knew my mom had other children now, had seen photos on social media, that she didn't want to cause problems but wondered if maybe, after all these years, they could have coffee. The last letter was from 8 months before my mum died. Claire writing that she understood my mum might never be ready, but if she ever changed her mind, Claire would be there. That she was grateful for the chance to write these letters even if they went unanswered. That she hoped my mum was healthy and happy. I sat in that closet for over an hour reading and rereading these letters. My mum had a whole other daughter. A daughter she'd given up at 16 and never told anyone about. Not my dad. Not me or my siblings. She'd carried this secret for decades while Claire reached out again and again, and she'd never responded. Never gave Claire the closure of even a single reply. I didn't know what to do with this information. My first instinct was to protect my mum's secret like she had. But Claire was out there. Claire had spent years trying to connect with family she'd never known, and now my mum was gone, and Claire probably had no idea. Would never know she'd missed her chance. I found Claire on Facebook using the return address from the letters. She lived about 2 hours away, had a family, grandkids even. I stared at her profile picture for a long time, trying to see any resemblance to my mum. Maybe around the eyes. I sent her a message. Told her who I was, that my mother had passed away, that I'd found her letters, that I was so sorry she never got a response. She replied within an hour, said she was devastated to hear about my mum's passing, that she'd always held out hope they'd meet someday, that she understood if I didn't want further contact, but she was grateful I'd reached out. We exchanged phone numbers and talked that night for almost 3 hours. Claire was kind, warm, understanding in a way that made me angry on her behalf. She said she'd always assumed my mum had her reasons for not responding, that giving up a baby at 16 must have been traumatic, and maybe she couldn't face those memories, that she didn't hold any resentment. I told her she had every right to be angry. She said anger wouldn't bring my mum back or change the past. But that wasn't even the worst part, because now I had to decide whether to tell my dad and siblings. This wasn't just my secret to keep. This was family. Claire was family, whether my mum had acknowledged it or not. I spent a week going back and forth before finally sitting my dad down and showing him the letters. He was shocked, sat there holding those letters like they might disappear if he blinked. Asked why she never told him. I didn't have an answer. He wasn't angry, just hurt. Said if he'd known, he would have supported her, would have welcomed Claire into our lives, that it broke his heart she'd carried this alone for so long. My siblings had mixed reactions. My brother was confused more than anything, kept asking why Mum would keep this secret. My sister was angry, said it was selfish of Mom to deny Claire a relationship all these years, that she'd robbed us of knowing our sister. I tried to defend Mom, said we didn't know what she was going through mentally or emotionally. My sister said that was exactly the point. We didn't know because she never trusted us enough to tell us. We decided together to reach out to Claire, invited her to meet us for lunch. It was awkward at first. She looked nervous, kept apologizing for imposing. I told her she wasn't imposing, that she was family and we were sorry it took this long. My dad hugged her and cried, said he wished he'd known sooner but he was grateful to know her now. And here's where it gets absurd. Claire brought photo albums, pictures of herself growing up, at her wedding with her kids. We saw pieces of our mum in her mannerisms. The way she laughed, how she tilted her head when she was thinking. It was like looking at a ghost of someone we'd known our whole lives, but also meeting someone completely new. She told us about her adoptive family. They'd been wonderful to her, given her every opportunity. She wasn't looking to replace them or pretend they didn't exist. She just wanted to understand the other half of her story, wanted to know her biological family. We told her about Mum, the good parts, the hard parts, things she probably would have wanted to know. We started including Claire in family things. She came to Thanksgiving, Christmas, got added to the family group chat where we share memes and make plans. Her kids call my dad Grandpa. It feels natural now, like she was always supposed to be there, and we just didn't know it yet. But I still feel angry at my mum sometimes. Not for giving Claire up, that was her choice to make as a scared teenager, but for keeping it secret for so long, for letting Claire write those letters year after year with no response, for dying without ever giving Claire the chance to know her. My mum's secrecy almost robbed us of something beautiful. I think about what would have happened if I hadn't found that box, if I'd just donated her clothes without checking the closet thoroughly. Claire would have spent the rest of her life wondering. We would have never known we had a sister, all because my mom couldn't face a painful part of her past. I wish she'd trusted us, wish she'd trusted my dad, who loved her unconditionally, wish she'd trusted me and my siblings to understand, but she didn't. And now we have to build these relationships without her. Claire says she's grateful we reached out at all, that some people never get even this much closure. I'm grateful too. Grateful Claire never gave up. Grateful she kept writing those letters even when they seemed to go into a void. She's wonderful, by the way, funny and smart and more forgiving than anyone has a right to be. Her kids are great. The family dinners are louder now, fuller. There's this whole branch of the family tree we didn't know existed, and now I can't imagine life without them. But I still look at that box of letters sometimes and wonder what my mum was thinking, what she was feeling every time a new one arrived, whether she wanted to respond and couldn't, or genuinely wanted to keep it buried forever. I'll never know. That's the thing about secrets, Edeni. Sometimes they die with the person who kept them, and you're left trying to piece together the why from the wreckage they leave behind. My brother had been dating Emma for 2 years. They'd met on some niche dating app for people with specific hobbies, something about hiking or photography, I can't remember. The whole relationship was long distance from the start. She lived 6 hours away, worked some remote job that required a lot of travel, so they mostly communicated through texts and video calls. He'd visit her occasionally, but she'd never come to our city. Always had some excuse: work commitment, family obligation, car trouble. It seemed weird to me, but my brother was happy, so I kept my mouth shut. When he announced they were engaged, our whole family was excited, but also a little concerned that we'd barely met her. We'd been on a few video calls, met her virtually at holidays, but she was always camera shy, had her camera angled weird or kept it mostly off, citing bad Wi-Fi or technical issues. We'd heard her voice in snippets, but never a full conversation. She seemed nice enough from what little we could gather. My brother talked about her constantly, said she was brilliant and kind and understood him in ways nobody else did. The wedding was planned for a Saturday in June. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Emma finally agreed to come into town for the rehearsal dinner on Friday night. This would be the first time any of us would meet her in person. My brother was nervous but excited, kept saying how much it meant to him that his two worlds were finally coming together. I got to the restaurant early, small private room in the back. Maybe 30 people expected. My parents were there, my sister, some aunts and uncles, my brother's friends from college. We were all making small talk, waiting. My brother kept checking his phone, texting Emma for updates. She was running late, traffic. Then her Uber got lost. Then she needed to run back to her hotel for something she forgot. An hour past the scheduled start time, she finally walked in. She was different than I expected from the grainy video calls. Older looking, more polished. She apologized profusely for being late, hugged my brother, and started making her rounds, greeting everyone. She was charming, good at working a room, made eye contact, asked questions, laughed at jokes. My mom loved her immediately. We sat down for dinner. Emma was at the head of the table next to my brother. I was a few seats down, close enough to hear but not directly next to them. The room was loud, everyone talking over each other, multiple conversations happening at once. But then someone made a toast and the room quieted down. Emma responded, thanking everyone for welcoming her, and that's when I heard it. Her voice, clear, uninterrupted, without video lag or poor audio quality. Just her natural speaking voice carrying across the quiet room. My stomach dropped. I knew that voice. I'd heard it before, but I couldn't immediately place where. It was so familiar it made my skin crawl. I watched her talk, trying to figure out why her voice was triggering this reaction. Then it clicked. 2 years ago, my best friend Sarah had gotten scammed out of $10,000 by a woman running a fake charity. Sarah had been devastated, both financially and emotionally. The scammer had called her multiple times, always with some sob story about sick kids or urgent medical needs. Sarah had recorded one of the calls to play for the police when she filed a report. I'd listened to that recording with Sarah at least a dozen times, helped her document everything for the fraud case. The woman's voice was distinctive, warm and trustworthy, but with this underlying practiced quality, like she'd said the same lines 100 times before. Emma had that exact same voice, same cadence, same slight rasp, same way of emphasizing certain words. I sat there in shock while everyone else continued celebrating. Told myself I was being paranoid. Lots of people have similar voices. This was my brother's fiancée. She was here to marry him. There was no way this was the same woman who'd scammed my best friend. But I couldn't shake it. The similarity was too exact. I excused myself from the table and went to the bathroom. Called Sarah. She picked up on the third ring. I asked her if she still had that recording from the scammer. She said yes. Why? I told her I needed her to send it to me immediately. She asked what was going on. I said I'd explain later, but it was urgent. She sent the audio file within minutes. I stood in that bathroom and played the recording. Listened to the scammer's voice asking Sarah for money, explaining the fake charity, building rapport and trust. Then I walked back into the dining room and listened to Emma talk. It was her. I was absolutely certain. Same voice, same speech patterns, same everything. I pulled my brother aside during dessert, told him we needed to talk privately. He looked annoyed, said it could wait until after dinner. I said it really couldn't. He excused himself and followed me out to the hallway. I told him I thought Emma might not be who she said she was, that her voice sounded exactly like a scammer who'd targeted Sarah 2 years ago. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. He said I was being ridiculous, that I was probably projecting or mishearing, that Emma had been nothing but wonderful to him for 2 years. I played him the recording. He listened, then said it didn't sound anything alike. I played it again. He insisted I was wrong, that I was trying to sabotage his wedding for some reason. We argued in hushed voices in that hallway while the rehearsal dinner continued without us. I told him I had court documents from Sarah's case, police reports, photos the scammer had used on fake charity websites. He said, fine, show me. I didn't have them on me, but Sarah did. I called her again, explained the situation, asked her to send everything she had. She said she'd email it all immediately. My brother and I went back to dinner. He was furious with me but trying to hide it. Emma noticed the tension, asked if everything was okay. He said it was fine. I watched her for the rest of the night, looking for anything else that seemed off. She caught me staring a few times and smiled awkwardly. After dinner, my brother came to my apartment. I'd printed everything Sarah sent. Police reports documenting the scam, photos from the fake charity website showing a woman who looked suspiciously like Emma, but with different hair and makeup, court documents from the fraud case, recorded phone conversations, email chains. It was all there. My brother went pale reading through it. He kept saying it couldn't be the same person, that there had to be an explanation. I asked him how much he really knew about Emma's past. He admitted she'd been vague about certain things. Her job history was inconsistent. She'd mentioned legal troubles but framed them as being wrongly accused of something by an ex. Then came the breaking point. I suggested we search her name online with quotation marks and add keywords like fraud or scam. We found 3 news articles, different names, but the photos were clearly her. Emma Thompson, Emma Rodriguez, Emma Chen. She'd run charity scams in multiple states, had 2 active restraining orders from previous victims. One article mentioned she was wanted for questioning in another fraud case. My brother sat on my couch with his head in his hands. His wedding was tomorrow. 200 guests were coming. The venue was paid for. His entire future was built on a relationship with someone who apparently didn't even exist. He called her, put it on speaker, asked her directly if she'd ever gone by other names. She said no. He asked if she'd ever been involved in charity fraud. She laughed and said, "What kind of question is that?" He started listing the names, the cases, the court documents. She went silent. Then she hung up. She called back 10 minutes later, admitted she'd made mistakes in her past, that she'd struggled with addiction and done things she wasn't proud of, that she'd changed, that she loved him and none of that mattered now. My brother asked about the active restraining orders. She said those were misunderstandings. He asked about the other aliases. She said she'd needed fresh starts. He told her the wedding was off. She started crying, begging him to reconsider. Said everyone deserves a second chance, that she'd been completely honest with him about who she was now, even if she hadn't been transparent about her past. He said lying by omission for 2 years wasn't honesty. He hung up. Emma texted him dozens of times that night, called from different numbers, showed up at his apartment at 3 in the morning. He didn't answer the door, called the police and filed a report about harassment. By morning she was gone, checked out of her hotel, blocked on all platforms, disappeared completely. My brother had to call off the wedding, sent a mass message to all the guests explaining there had been a serious issue and the wedding was cancelled. Most people were understanding. Some demanded details. He gave them the basics without going into the full story. Lost most of the deposits. The venue, the caterer, the photographer. Thousands of dollars gone. Our family rallied around him. My parents were shocked. My sister felt guilty she hadn't pushed harder to meet Emma earlier. Everyone had questions about how this had happened, how someone could fake a relationship for 2 years, how my brother, who was smart and successful, could have been so thoroughly deceived. He was devastated, not just about the wedding, but about the relationship he'd thought was real. He'd been planning a future with someone who'd lied about their entire identity. He'd told her things he'd never told anyone, trusted her completely, and she'd been running a long con the whole time, though we're still not sure what her endgame was. Marriage fraud, access to his money, we'll probably never know. He started therapy the following week, has been going regularly ever since, working through trust issues and trying to understand how he missed the red flags. There were signs looking back, her reluctance to meet in person, the vague background, the inconsistencies in her stories. But when you want something to be real, you rationalize away the doubts. I saved him from what would have been a catastrophic marriage, but he's still dealing with the aftermath, still healing from the betrayal, still angry at her, at himself, at the situation. Sometimes he thanks me. Sometimes he resents me for being the one who shattered his reality. Both reactions are valid. Emma was never caught, probably moved to a new city with a new name and a new target. The police added her information to existing fraud cases, but without her cooperation or a known location, there wasn't much they could do. She's just out there somewhere, running the same playbook on someone else. And my brother? He's rebuilding, slowly, taking things one day at a time, not dating yet, not ready, but he's alive and safe and not legally bound to a con artist. That's something. After my dad died, everything felt surreal. The funeral, the condolences, the endless casseroles from neighbors. My mum seemed devastated, which made sense. They'd been married for 35 years. My sister and I were grieving too, but we were also trying to handle logistics. Dad had owned a small manufacturing business that he'd built from nothing. He'd always told us it would be ours someday. that we'd run it together, keep his legacy alive. The will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral. My sister and I showed up at the lawyer's office expecting the standard stuff. Some money to Mum, the business split between us, maybe a few specific items distributed to family members. Dad had talked about his wishes openly. He wasn't secretive about wanting us to have the company. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, seemed uncomfortable from the moment we sat down, kept adjusting his glasses, shuffling papers. He read through the will quickly. Everything went to my mother. The house, the savings, the business, full ownership with no conditions. My sister and I were mentioned briefly as recipients of some personal effects. Dad's watch for me. His book collection for my sister. That was it. We sat there in shock. My sister asked if there was a mistake. Mr. Patterson said no. This was the will on file. That it had been updated 6 months ago. My mum didn't look surprised. Didn't even look at us. Just nodded and thanked the lawyer. I asked to see the document. Mr. Patterson hesitated but slid it across the desk. I'd seen my dad's signature 1,000,000 times. On birthday cards, permission slips, business documents. This looked similar, but something was off. The loop on the capital letters was too tight. The slant was different. I asked when this will had been prepared. Mr. Patterson checked his records and said my mother had brought it in. Said my father had prepared it privately and wanted it filed. My sister and I exchanged looks. Dad had used Mr. Patterson for legal matters for 20 years. If he'd wanted to update his will, he would have done it through the office, with witnesses, following proper procedures. He wouldn't have prepared something privately and had Mum deliver it. That didn't make sense. After we left, I told my sister something felt very wrong. She agreed. We decided to request copies of all the documents. Mr. Patterson was legally obligated to provide them. When we got the files, I took them to a forensic document analyst, someone who specialized in handwriting verification and fraud detection. The analyst took one look at the signature and said it was forged. Not even a good forgery. The pressure points were wrong, the flow was inconsistent, and under microscopic examination, you could see hesitation marks where someone had traced over a template. The will had been written recently, probably within the last few months, and the signature was absolutely not my father's. I felt sick. My own mother had forged my father's will. While he was dying, or maybe right after, she'd created a fake document to cut us out of our inheritance. The analyst provided a detailed report with comparison samples from my dad's verified signatures. The evidence was damning. I called my sister. She couldn't believe it at first, kept saying there had to be another explanation. But we both knew Mum had been acting strange in the months before Dad died, insisting on handling all his paperwork, saying he was too tired to deal with business matters. We'd thought she was being protective. Turns out she was planning. We confronted her together, showed up at the house with the forensic report. She tried to deny it at first, said the analyst was wrong, that Dad had definitely signed that will. I asked her why he would suddenly change everything he'd promised us, why he'd cut his own children out completely after decades of saying the business was ours. Then came the breaking point. She started crying and said she deserved it, that she'd spent 35 years supporting Dad's dreams, raising us, keeping the household running while he built his company, that she'd sacrificed her own career and ambitions, that we were ungrateful and didn't understand how hard her life had been, that the business should be hers because she'd earned it. I told her that even if all that was true, it didn't give her the right to forge a legal document and steal our inheritance, that Dad had wanted us to have the business and she'd literally committed fraud to override his wishes. She said we didn't need it, that we had our own careers and lives, that she was old and deserved security. My sister asked her point blank if she'd forged the will. Mum went quiet, then said she'd done what she had to do, that Dad had been planning to leave everything to us and it wasn't fair, that she'd devoted her whole life to him and deserved more than just being taken care of. The admission hung in the air. She'd actually done it, forged documents to rewrite her dying husband's will. We filed a legal challenge the next day, submitted the forensic report, witness statements from people Dad had told about his wishes, business documents showing he'd been training us to take over. Mr. Patterson had to testify that the will seemed unusual, but he'd accepted it because my mother claimed Dad had wanted privacy. The court process took months. Mum hired a lawyer who tried to argue that the forensic analysis was inconclusive, that even if the signature was forged, Maybe Dad had asked her to sign for him because he was too weak, that his verbal wishes to leave everything to her should count. None of it held up. The evidence was too clear. During discovery, we found the real will. Dad had filed it with a different attorney, someone he'd consulted specifically to make sure everything was airtight. Equal three-way split. The business would go to me and my sister jointly, with Mom receiving 40% of the profits for life to ensure she was taken care of. The house and savings split evenly. It was fair, generous to all of us, exactly what Dad had always said he wanted. The court ruled in our favor, invalidated the forged will and instated the real one. But that wasn't even the most devastating part. The prosecutor decided to investigate my mother for fraud and forgery. She could have faced criminal charges. Her lawyer negotiated a deal where she'd pay restitution and court costs in exchange for no jail time, given her age and lack of prior criminal history. My sister and I had to decide whether to push for prosecution. We chose not to, not because we forgave her, but because putting our mother in prison wouldn't bring Dad back or undo what she'd done. We just wanted his real wishes honored. The legal ruling accomplished that. Mum was furious, said we'd destroyed her life over money, that she'd never forgive us for dragging her through court. I told her she'd destroyed our relationship the moment she forged that will, that she'd betrayed Dad's memory and our trust. That this wasn't about money, it was about honoring our father's wishes and holding her accountable for fraud. We're estranged now, haven't spoken to her in over a year. She tried reaching out through relatives, saying we were cruel and heartless, that she was our mother and deserved respect. My sister blocked her number. I did too eventually. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive. My sister runs the business now. She's good at it, better than I would be, honestly. I consult and handle some of the financial side, but it's really her show. We make sure Mum gets her 40% like Dad wanted. We're not trying to punish her financially. We're just done with her personally. I think about Dad every day. Wonder if he knew what Mum was planning. If he suspected she'd try something like this. Is that why he filed that separate will? Or did he trust her completely and never saw it coming? I'll never know. What I do know is that we fought for his real wishes and won. The business he built is being run by the children he wanted to have it. And my mum? She made her choice when she decided that forging legal documents was acceptable. She has to live with the consequences of that choice for the rest of her life. My aunt died after a long battle with cancer. It wasn't unexpected, but that didn't make it any easier. She was one of those people who held the family together, always hosting holidays, remembering birthdays, mediating arguments. Her funeral was planned to be small and intimate, just family and close friends at a local chapel. My uncle had handled all the arrangements, seemed devastated. My cousins were destroyed. They'd just lost their mum and were trying to hold it together. The service started on time. The pastor was giving the eulogy. People were crying quietly, sharing tissues, holding hands. Standard funeral atmosphere. Sad but peaceful. Then the chapel doors opened and this woman walked in. None of us recognized her. She was maybe mid-50s, dressed in black, sobbing loudly. Like, really loudly. Making a scene kind of sobbing. She walked straight down the aisle while the pastor was still talking. Sat in the second row right behind my uncle and cousins. My uncle turned around to see who it was, and his face went completely white. He looked like he was about to pass out. My cousin leaned over and asked if he knew her. He shook his head but couldn't take his eyes off her. The service continued, but everyone was distracted now. This woman was crying harder than anyone in the room, including my uncle and his kids who'd actually lost someone. It felt performative and weird. After the eulogy, there was a reception in the church hall. Light refreshments, people sharing memories, that sort of thing. The mystery woman showed up to that too. She approached my cousins while they were standing with some relatives, introduced herself as someone who loved their mother very much, said she wanted to pay her respects. My oldest cousin thanked her politely and asked how she knew their mum. The woman got this strange look on her face and said she knew the whole family very well, that she'd been part of their lives for 15 years even if they didn't know it. My uncle materialized out of nowhere and tried to steer the woman away, told her she should leave. She refused, said she had every right to be there, that she'd loved my aunt too, in her own way. My cousins were confused, asking what was going on. The woman looked at my uncle and said, "Are you really not going to tell them?" And here's where it gets absurd. This woman announced to my cousins at their mother's funeral reception that she'd been having an affair with their father for 15 years, that she wasn't there to mourn my aunt exactly, but to support my uncle in his grief, that she knew this was complicated but she couldn't stay away. The room went silent. Everyone within earshot stopped talking and stared. My uncle tried to deny it, called her crazy, said she was a disturbed person who'd been stalking him. The woman pulled out her phone and started showing people photos, her and my uncle on vacation, at restaurants. In what was clearly her apartment, timestamps going back over a decade. She had receipts, literally and figuratively. My cousins were in shock. The oldest one, my cousin Sarah, just kept saying this can't be real over and over. The youngest started crying. The middle one, Jake, got angry, started yelling at his dad asking if this was true. My uncle tried to pull them aside to talk privately, but they refused. Told him to explain right there in front of everyone. The mistress kept talking, said my uncle had promised to leave my aunt multiple times but never did, that he'd been supporting her financially for years, paying her rent, taking her on trips, buying her gifts. She listed specific details, a trip to Hawaii 3 years ago that my uncle had claimed was a work conference, a weekend in Vegas that was supposedly a golf trip with friends, every lie exposed in real time. My aunt's sister, my other aunt, started screaming at my uncle, calling him every name you can imagine. Other family members joined in. It turned into chaos. The pastor came out trying to calm everyone down, reminding them where they were. The mistress finally left, still crying, saying she just wanted to honor the woman whose husband she'd been sleeping with for 15 years. The audacity was genuinely impressive in the worst possible way. My uncle tried to do damage control, started making excuses, said he'd been lonely in his marriage, that my aunt had been distant for years, that the affair meant nothing. My cousin Sarah cut him off, told him their mother had been distant because she'd been battling cancer for 3 years, that maybe she'd been exhausted from treatments and managing a household while her husband was apparently living a double life. Things went from bad to unhinged when Jake asked how much money my uncle had given this woman. My uncle refused to answer. Jake said he was asking because their mom had been worried about finances before she died, had mentioned they were having trouble paying medical bills, had cut back on her own treatments at one point because she didn't want to bankrupt the family. And apparently the whole time, my uncle had been funding a mistress. The family fractured immediately. My uncle's kids told him they never wanted to see him again. Other relatives took sides. Some said my aunt must have known on some level and chosen to stay. Others said that didn't excuse anything. The funeral reception ended early. Everyone just left. My uncle sat alone in that church hall looking destroyed. But that wasn't even the most devastating part. A week later, my aunt's will was read. She'd updated it 6 months before she died, left everything to her kids, the house, the savings, her life insurance. My uncle got nothing. The lawyer said my aunt had been very specific about it, had included a note saying she knew about the affair and had known for years that she'd stayed for her kids but wasn't going to reward her husband's betrayal in death. Apparently, my aunt had hired a private investigator 2 years ago, had proof of everything, had been quietly protecting her assets and making sure her children would be taken care of after she was gone. She'd known about the mistress, the money, all of it, and she'd never said a word. Just made her plans and left my uncle with nothing but his guilt and his destroyed relationship with his kids. My uncle tried to contest the will. His lawyer told him he had no case, tried to reconcile with his kids. They blocked his number, showed up at Sarah's house, and she threatened to call the police. He sent letters they returned unopened, posted on Facebook about being misunderstood, and people commented telling him exactly how understood he was. The mistress apparently broke up with him after the funeral. Guess a widower with no money and no family isn't as appealing as a married man with resources. Last I heard, my uncle is living alone in a small apartment, working past retirement age because he lost the house. His kids have nothing to do with him. He missed his daughter's wedding, wasn't invited to meet his first grandchild. He showed up to that funeral thinking he'd play the grieving widow, accept condolences, maintain his image. Instead, his mistress exposed everything. His wife got the last word from beyond the grave, and he lost his children, his reputation, and his inheritance all in 1 week. My aunt spent her final months making sure the truth would come out and her kids would be protected. She won even after she was gone, And every time someone in the family mentions my uncle now, it's with this mixture of disgust and something almost like respect for how thoroughly my aunt dismantled his life from beyond the grave. She knew, she planned, and she made sure he'd face every consequence she couldn't give him while she was alive. After my grandma passed away, our family went through the difficult process of settling her estate. She'd been organized her whole life, kept meticulous records, made everything as easy as possible for us. We were going through her filing cabinet when my cousin found a folder of bank statements from an account none of us knew existed. It wasn't a huge amount, maybe $30,000 total, but what caught our attention were the monthly transfers. $2,000 every single month for the past 8 years, going to someone named Marcus Reed. Nobody in the family recognized the name. We thought maybe it was a caretaker we didn't know about, or some charity she supported. My mum suggested it might be fraud, that someone had been scamming her. But the transfers were too consistent, too deliberate. They'd been going out like clockwork on the 15th of every month. This wasn't a scam. This was intentional. I started digging. Searched the name online, cross-referenced it with family records, asked older relatives if they'd ever heard of a Marcus Reed. Nothing. Then I found an old address book in Grandma's desk. Tucked in the back was a piece of paper with a phone number and the name Marcus, with a small heart drawn next to it. That's when I knew this was someone she cared about. I called the number. A young man answered. I introduced myself as Grandma's granddaughter and asked if he was Marcus Reed. He went quiet for a long moment, then said yes, asked if something had happened to her. I told him she'd passed away 2 weeks ago. He started crying on the phone, said he'd been trying to reach her but couldn't get through, that he'd sent letters but never got responses, that he was so sorry he didn't get to say goodbye. I asked him how he knew my grandmother. He said she was his grandmother too. My mind went blank. I asked him to explain. He said his father was her son, my uncle. The uncle my parents never talked about. The uncle who'd been disowned from the family 20 years ago. The story came out in pieces. My uncle had been in business with my dad decades ago. There'd been some kind of partnership that went bad. Money disappeared, accusations of theft, a massive falling out that ended with my parents cutting off all contact and forbidding anyone in the family from maintaining a relationship with my uncle or his side of the family. I'd heard whispers about it growing up, but never the full story. It was family history that nobody talked about. Marcus was my uncle's son, my cousin, technically, though I'd never met him. He said my grandmother had reached out to him 8 years ago, right after he'd graduated high school. She'd found him through social media, sent him a message saying she was sorry for the family division and wanted to help him. She started sending him money every month, helped him pay for community college, then his transfer to a 4-year university, helped with rent when he moved out of his dad's place, helped him get through a medical emergency when he didn't have insurance. She'd been secretly supporting him for almost a decade, never told anyone in the family, knew my parents would be furious if they found out, but she'd done it anyway because Marcus was her grandson and she loved him, regardless of what had happened between the adults. I asked Marcus if he'd tried to visit her. He said yes, multiple times. He'd driven to her house twice. The first time, my parents were there and turned him away at the door, told him he wasn't welcome and that if he tried to contact Grandma again, they'd call the police. The second time, he'd called ahead and she'd agreed to meet him at a coffee shop. They'd spent 3 hours together. She'd cried and hugged him and told him she was proud of him. That was 2 years ago. He'd wanted to visit again, but she'd asked him not to, said it was too risky, that my parents checked her phone and watched her house. Then came the breaking point. I had to tell my parents, showed them the bank statements, explained who Marcus was and what Grandma had been doing. My dad's face went red. My mom started crying angry tears. They called it a betrayal, said Grandma had gone behind their backs to support the son of a man who'd stolen from them, that she'd chosen sides, that this proved she'd never respected their boundaries. I tried to explain that Marcus hadn't done anything wrong, that he was just a kid when the family split happened, that Grandma was trying to bridge a gap and help someone she loved. My dad said it didn't matter, that by supporting Marcus, she was supporting his father, that it was disrespectful to them and everything they'd been through. We were planning a small memorial service for Grandma, just family, some of her friends from church, a few neighbors. I made a decision that I knew would cause problems. I called Marcus and invited him, told him he had every right to be there. that he was family and Grandma would have wanted him there. He showed up, stood in the back quietly. My parents saw him immediately. My dad's face went dark. He walked straight over and told Marcus to leave. Marcus said he just wanted to pay his respects. My dad said he had no right to be there after what his father had done, that he needed to go before things got ugly. I stepped between them, told my dad that Marcus was Grandma's grandson and had every right to be at her memorial, that she'd been supporting him for years because she loved him, that holding a decades-old grudge against a kid who'd done nothing wrong was exactly the kind of thing Grandma would have hated. My parents walked out, just left their own mother's memorial service. Some relatives followed them, taking sides. But my siblings stayed. My younger sister stood next to me. My brother came over and introduced himself to Marcus, shook his hand. About half the people there stayed for the service. Marcus gave a short speech about Grandma, talked about how she'd changed his life, how her support had allowed him to get an education and build a future, how she'd been kind to him when the rest of the family had shut him out, how grateful he was for every conversation they'd had, even though they'd been limited. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. After the service, my siblings and I exchanged numbers with Marcus, started a group chat. We've stayed in touch ever since. He's kind, thoughtful, smart, works as a teacher now, coaches youth basketball on weekends. He's exactly the kind of person Grandma would have been proud of, and she was, even if she couldn't say it publicly. My parents haven't spoken to me much since. They're civil at family events, but there's a distance now. They think I disrespected them by inviting Marcus and defending him. I think they disrespected Grandma by walking out of her memorial and by forcing her to hide a relationship with her own grandson for years. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. Marcus shared letters Grandma had written him. She'd sent them occasionally over the years, always to his work address so his dad wouldn't accidentally see them and feel hurt about the secrecy. In one letter, she wrote about how much she regretted the family division, how she wished my dad and his brother could reconcile but knew it was unlikely, how she hoped that future generations wouldn't carry the same grudges. That family was too important to throw away over money and pride. Reading those letters made me realize Grandma knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't betraying anyone. She was choosing love over grudges, choosing to support someone who needed help regardless of family politics. She'd probably known it would cause problems after she died, but she did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. My siblings and I have made an effort to include Marcus in family things. He came to my sister's graduation, my brother's wedding, holiday dinners when my parents aren't hosting. It's not perfect and there's still awkwardness, but we're building something, creating the kind of family Grandma wanted us to be. Marcus told me once that Grandma had said she hoped someday the family would heal, that maybe her grandchildren would do what her children couldn't. I think about that a lot, about how one person's choice to love unconditionally created a ripple effect, about how secrets kept to protect someone can end up being the thing that brings people together. My parents still won't acknowledge Marcus, still think Grandma was wrong, but I'm proud of her, proud that she stood by her principles even when it was difficult, proud that she chose compassion over loyalty to a grudge, and I'm trying to honor that by building relationships they refuse to allow. Grandma left me more than I expected in her will. Not money, though there was some of that. She left me a lesson about what family really means, about choosing love over pride, about standing up for what's right even when it costs you something. Marcus was worth every penny she sent him, and she knew it. I'm just glad the rest of us are finally figuring it out too. If you've made it this far into the chaos, thank you for sticking with me through every twist, betrayal, and family explosion. These stories remind us that truth always finds a way out, whether through a synced phone, a secret TikTok, or a forgotten letter in a closet. Sweet dreams, everyone. And remember, secrets don't stay buried forever. Sometimes all it takes is one unlocked phone, one wrong photo, or one brave person willing to speak the truth. If any of these stories hit close to home, you're not alone. And if you've got your own story brewing, maybe it's time to let it out. I'll see you in the next one. Sleep well, or as well as you can after all that drama.